I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask you all to rise as we say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to ask Selectman McCarthy-Vahey to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if I might, I'd like to ask us to stand for a moment of silence. This is our last Board of Selectmen meeting before Veterans Day, which will be coming up next week. And if you could keep the veterans that have made the ultimate sacrifice, as well as those men and women still serving in our military today, in your thoughts. Thank you. All right, thank you. First off, before we get into our agenda, I did want to take a moment and thank and congratulate those that were victorious yesterday in our election in town. Congrats to our new state senator, Tony Wong, and congrats to our new state rep, Laura Devlin, and congrats to our newly re-elected state rep, Brenda Kupchak, in the 132nd. And lastly, but not leastly, congrats to our own Selectman Kristen McCarthy-Vahey on being elected as the new state rep in the 133rd. Congratulations, Kristen. Now, as always, it's always nice to give congrats to the folks, but to the winners. But I also think it's important that we say thank you to everybody who ran. When I look at the candidates across the board and those that weren't fortunate enough to win, I was very impressed with the skills, the experience that they brought to the table, and I think their participation in this democratic process makes our community richer and makes us better for their service. And I look forward to seeing them pop up in other opportunities in our town and perhaps on the state level moving forward. All right. Next up, for our minutes, to consider and act upon the minutes of the regular meeting of October 15th, 2014. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes are passed. Next up, we recently completed Restaurant Week. I've joked that next year we're going to have to improve on this, Mark, and I hope you'll take note of this, that after Restaurant Week we've got to have Health Club Week. So I'm showing the benefits of Restaurant Week way too much. But we do have some drawings, and I've got a brief script to read here. Today I want to take a few minutes to recap our recently concluded Restaurant Week and to hold a prize drawing for the grand prize and 2 other special prizes in connection with our passport promotion. For those of you that participated, you know you got your passport stamped, and that made you eligible for additional gifts. I want to ask my fellow selectmen to help me with the honors. But before we do, I want to thank everyone who participated to make our 3rd annual. Wow, it seems like a lot longer than that. It's really become part of our culture. Sure. Our 3rd annual Fairfield Restaurant Week. Of course, Mark's saying that because he gets to plan it all. For making it such a rousing success. Fairfield Restaurant Week has quickly become something of a tradition, something to look forward to each year, and it keeps getting better and better. We had a record number of restaurants. For those of you counting, 38 restaurants participated. And the word is out that Fairfield is the in-place for dining, and I want to thank our many fine restaurants for participating and for showcasing their cuisine. I especially want to thank our sponsors. Bankwell, Mr. Bob Palermo is here. Bob and back, thank you very much. You've been here right from the start, right? You've participated in all 3 years? Yes. All right, thank you very much. Meridian Risk Management, Bill Tweedy, is Bill here? All right. Meridian stepped up. They were a new sponsor this year and really helped out. And our grand prize contributor, Southport Delamar and Artisan Restaurant. Is Jackie here? Jackie Kessler? Jackie, there we are. So, without any further ado, let's go see who won. We're going to, why don't we each pick one, if that works for you guys?
Sure.
Great.
And Kristen, we'll let you go first in honor of your new status. All right, so let's see. First up, courtesy of the Fairfield Theater Company, whose stage 1 is hands down the best spot to hear live music in the area. We have a $200 showbox, good for any upcoming show. So, Kristen,
All right.
swirl them around and pick our lucky winner.
I'm going to dig deep here. I'm really digging.
Hopefully the passports actually come out of the box. I'm not quite sure how they got in.
All right, here we go.
All right, we need the name and the town of the winner.
It's in the front inside jacket.
Oh, I see. Here we go. Okay, Scott Lehman from North Haven, Connecticut.
Wow, out-of-town money. All right.
Works.
Nothing is better than out-of-town money, guys. Congratulations, Scott. Next up, Mr. Conlon, I'm going to ask you to do honors. And now, for this special 375th anniversary prize, count them, 2 complimentary tickets to the official 375th anniversary gala to be held November 15th at the Pit at Sacred Heart.
Fantastic.
Who's our lucky winner?
And the lucky winner is Richard Schneider of Fairfield, Connecticut.
All right.
Great.
What better way to pick Fairfield
Right.
resident for the 375th?
All right.
And finally, the fabulous grand prize, a night stay and deluxe accommodations at the Southport Del Mar, plus dinner for 2 at the acclaimed Artesian Restaurant, which I can speak from personal experience, it is highly acclaimed. All right, here we go. You left it to me.
I did. That's deep. They're packed in there really tight.
A lot of
Sorry.
passports, a lot of people
I need
participating.
a bigger box next year, I'm sorry.
Or smaller passports. Okay, here we are.
Fewer restaurants.
And the winner is Ann Steffen of Fairfield. All right, another one. Great. There you go. All right, and again, we want to thank everybody, especially all the residents that participated in Restaurant Week. The one thing I've heard back from restaurant owners across town is that it was booked all week long. There was a great buzz going through. One restaurant owner even told me it was his busiest year in 6 years. So just phenomenal. So thank you to everybody for coming out. All right. Mark, did I forget anything on that? Or is it, yes, we've got one final comment. Mark asked me to make sure that I reminded everybody, we posted a short survey on the economic development page of the town's website. That's www.fairfieldct.org/econ development, E-C-O-N development. And as an extra incentive to give us feedback, you'll get a chance to win a $50 gift card at the Little Goose Cafe. Now, the Little Goose was one of the restaurants I did get to stop in during Restaurant Week, and it's well worth filling out the survey to get a chance to go there.
Thanks very much.
All right, next up, some recognition. We have recognition for former Pequot Library Executive Director Martha Lord. Martha's been a good friend of the community, has done wonders for the Pequot Library, stepping in when it needed some help and her skills, and it's been a privilege and pleasure to work with her these past few years. And on her behalf, we have a proclamation. Whereas, the town of Fairfield congratulates and thanks Dr. Martha Gates Lord for her tremendous accomplishments, as I was up way too late last night, guys, for all the obvious reasons, as former executive director of the Pequot Library. And whereas, before coming to Pequot Library, Martha had been in the education and not-for-profit industry for over 15 years. She completed her undergraduate education at Johns Hopkins University, earned a master's in financial management from Fairfield University, and a doctorate in education. And whereas, on August 1st, 2012, Martha was hired as interim executive director at Pequot. She was given the charge to lead a review of the Pequot Library's mission, its strategies, and develop a sustainable business model for the future. After 6 months, given the progress and positive momentum at the library, Martha was asked to extend her leadership role and was hired as the permanent executive director, with the intention of continuing the progress being made and allowing time for a national search for her longer-term replacement. And whereas one of Martha's many career highlights at Pequot has been a relentless focus on offering top-quality programs through professional collaborations that include presenting music in the spectacular auditorium and concert hall with award-winning musicians through free young persons concerts, and music at Pequot. The annual series, along with achieving a sellout audience for Art Garfunkel. I was at that one. Alex Bayer, I was at his too. The Yale Alley Cats and Women Rhythm, I saw them too. Martha, great choices. And whereas, in collaboration with the Fairfield Public Library and through Martha's leadership, Pequot Library recently introduced the town-wide library card initiative, One Card, One Town, maximizing available resources to our town citizens. And whereas in July 2014, Martha was recognized with a State of Connecticut General Assembly official citation reading, "In recognition of your substantial and tireless work leading the Pequot Library, your efforts have had a significant positive impact on the Fairfield community and have resulted in a material betterment of this beloved institution. Now therefore, I, Michael C. Tetro, first Selectman of the town of Fairfield, do hereby proclaim November 5th as Martha Lord Day throughout the town." Congratulations, Martha. Come on up.
Coming out to greet you.
Congratulations, and thank you for everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you so much. That's nice, Kevin.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Well,
And I think we get a photo up here.
okay.
Stick your finger in there, see?
And then, would you like to take a few moments for rebuttal?
Rebuttal? No, but I would, Heather Marie, come up. I would like to thank you so much. I'm so honored, and it's really been such a pleasure to serve as the director to the Pequot Library. But I would like to take a few minutes and just tell you about my successor here, and this is Heather Marie Montilla. And Heather has joined the library as of the middle of October, and she and I have been working together for a smooth transition going forward. Heather is, I'm very excited that she's joined us because she brings great expertise. She's been working in the not-for-profit world, in both in the arts and in a museum background, and she brings wonderful education. She's a Duke Devil, is that what they're called? It is. And then has her master's in public service from Columbia University, and she's enthusiastic and excited to be at Pequot Library. So I know she'll look forward to having a chance to speak with you all in the future. So thanks so much. Thank you.
Kevin, did you have any comments to add?
I just wanted to thank you, Martha. I mean, over the years, the work you have done to enhance and grow our library and to expand the programs into music and the arts has had a profound impact on our community, our families, and our children. And I just want to thank you very much for all those efforts.
Well, thank you.
And I would add my thanks, and also to say that clearly the work that you've done has been about the community and about the library. Even today, you're introducing your successor, and so it's really a testament to you and to the work you've done for this community.
Well, thank you. And I'd also like to recognize our Board of Trustees, and we have several of them here. These are all volunteers who serve and really work so hard to promote and ensure the viability of the Pequot Library. So I'd like to give a round of applause to our Board of Trustees.
Now, Martha, I'd also like to thank you again and just confirm you've been a great friend of Fairfield. Thank you for everything you've done. Now, you're not totally going away, if I understand things correctly.
No, I'm not going anywhere, so I look forward to being a volunteer here.
Good. Oh, she
Great.
said.
All right. Look forward to seeing you at more of these concerts.
Okay.
Thanks.
Next up, item 6, resignations. This is for information only. Thomas F. Flynn, Democrat, 67 Satcham Road, who was serving through December 14, has resigned. In fact, he resigned last spring. We'll be looking for a replacement for him on the Fair TV Operational Committee. If not before December, certainly shortly thereafter, as it's currently under consideration for being reformed by the RTM.
Excuse me, can you just announce that there are some chairs available up front?
Oh, for those in back, it's kind of like church here. There are some seats in front.
Thank you. you. Changing of the guard. Thank you.
No, thanks for pointing that out. All right, now that we're in the process of kind of rearranging our seats and getting everybody more comfortable, let's move on. Item 7, our first selectman appointments. These are for information only. To the Housing Authority, James D. Kelly, Republican, 32 Mill Hill Road, for a term of 11/11 through November 16. And this is filling a vacancy for Andrew Bumgarner, who resigned. Is Jim here? All right, thank you. And next is the Parking Authority. Michael McCreesh, Democrat, 55 Acorn Lane. His term is from November 13 to November 18 to fill a vacancy for Matt Prohaska, whose term expired. Is Michael here? All right. All right, then next up, we have appointments. Now, we've got 9 of these.
9 of them,
Is
right.
it okay to do these as
Yes.
one motion? I think so.
Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. To hear, consider, and act upon the following appointments. And these are 9 appointments to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee. This is a committee that we made a standing committee for the town just a few months back. Keith Gallinelli, unaffiliated, 657 Mill Hill Road, for a term of 11/14 to 11/17. Elizabeth Gardner, Democrat, 882 Reef Road, for a term from 11/14 to 11/16. Don Hyman, Democrat, from 61 Northfield Road, for a term of 11/14 to 11/17. Linda Lotch, Democrat, 21 Papua Road, for a term of November 14 to November 16. Edward Lane, Republican, 121 New England Avenue, for a term of 11/14 to November 16. Laura O'Brien, Democrat, 178 Glengarry Road, for a term of November 14 to November 17. William Pollack, Democrat, 49 Newman Place, for a term of November 14 to November 18. Karen Seacrest, unaffiliated, 98 Brooklawn Parkway, for a term of 11/14 to 11/18. And Robert Toda, unaffiliated, 157 Tanglewood Lane, for a term of 11/14 to 11/18. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Any comments from the board? Kristen?
How did you know I would like to comment about this? I am thrilled and honored to be making this motion and to be supporting this motion today. It was a long time coming, and I see Alyssa Israel here, and those of you who also served on the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee
right.
know that many years of work went into this. And I'm actually wondering if we can ask folks to, at some point in the course of this conversation, step forward so people can be recognized, and maybe we can even get a group photo.
Yeah, I think once we're done with our remarks, that's a great idea.
That would be wonderful. So I'm thrilled to have everyone, those of you who are here today, I know not everyone could make it, but I also just wanted to comment that much like the Penfield Building Committee, we had a lot of interest for this committee, which was amazing, just absolutely wonderful. And it just is a testament to the community and to the desire of people in the community to make this town more pedestrian-friendly, more bike-friendly, and safer for all users in every form of transit. So I'm really excited about this. And thank you all for your willingness to serve. There's a lot of work to be done.
Kevin, any thoughts?
Sure. I would like to echo Kristen's comments. It's been a while that we've worked on this, and Kristen has worked very hard on this with both the advisory committee and the new permanent committee as well. And I just want to thank all the volunteers who have stepped up to be part of this new committee and the advisory committees committee members who have worked up until now to help Fairfield continue to advance these projects and to make our town more safe and more open for bicycles and for pedestrians and for better traffic movement and safety throughout the whole town. So thank you so much.
And I would echo those comments, and especially looking forward, one of the struggles we have as a town is when you've been around for 375 years, you've built up a lot of things, because that was the way it was done 375 years ago. One of the challenges is figuring out how to incorporate new approaches, new technologies, new lifestyles into our town, and the Bike Pedestrian Committee certainly has that task ahead of them. So thank you all for your service and stepping up. Any comments from the public? Back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, and anybody who is on the list, could you come up to the front?
Could we ask people to just introduce themselves? I think someone has a foldable bike here, right?
I do.
Don't they? Can you bring it for the picture?
It's on the hall. They told me to put it in the hall. I can bring it in.
Oh,
See?
bring it in,
Bring it in.
please.
Short timer.
Who could say no to you?
All right, is there somebody who would like to speak on behalf of, or introduce yourselves? Why don't we do that? Whoa!
Look at that.
Obviously, you can walk at night. And we have, let's get, all right, let's start at that end. If you could just introduce yourself, that would be great.
Laura O'Brien.
I'm Don Hyman.
Betsy Gardner.
Bill Pollock.
Karen Seacrest.
Edward Lane.
Keith Gallo.
Is that what, I was really checking to see if I got the pronunciation right on. You guys did good. On my Tetra, you're, no.
Yeah.
There you go. I really meant what I said. As you travel to different towns and cities around, and certainly like New York City, you see some of the transformation they've gone through to allow for bike and improve pedestrian traffic and how to mix the two. And that's the ultimate challenge, you know, a shore town in terms of how to. So you've got your work cut out for you going forward. Any further comments here?
Thank you. And I'll be in touch via the first selectman's office to help kick off the first organizational meeting with the guidance of the first selectman, of course.
Fantastic. Thank you again, and thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Did
Did you get your picture?
I did. I
Don't
wouldn't
leave
mind
yet.
getting another one.
She's ready.
Hang to work just.
There you go.
Awesome.
Where should we look?
This side? Thank
All right, now if you'll all stay here just one moment. In order to let you get started right away, if you'll raise your right hand, do you solemnly and sincerely affirm that you will faithfully discharge, according to law, your duties as a member of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee to the best of your abilities upon penalty of perjury? All right, congratulations, you're ready to go to work. Thank you.
How are you? Thank you,
Good turnout.
Thank you.
Ready to go.
I appreciate that.
Yes.
That was efficient, getting them sworn in and everything.
All right, I need, we're moving on to the second part of item 8. To hear, consider, and act upon the following appointment. Allison Savona, Democrat, 272 Knollwood Drive, for a term of November 10 to November 15. She's filling the vacancy created by the passing of George Zigma. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All right. Is Allison here?
I am.
Oh, there we are.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Hi,
coming.
Allison.
Any comments or questions from the board?
Questions? No? Thank you for volunteering.
Thank you.
Yes, agreed, very much.
Allison, just one. How did you get interested in shellfish?
Well,
If you come to the podium, speak.
Oh, sure.
Just so the folks at home can hear you.
Absolutely. Well, I heard of the vacancy through a commission member, a current commission member who's a good friend. And I just I've come up through the food and beverage, restaurant, hotel management industry, so I have a great love of food. My husband's a chef, so we have a great interest in harvesting local products, utilizing what's current, food safety, and so we just have a love of the shell, if you would, really have an appreciation for it, and so look forward to adding value to the committee and also making it more known across the community, the opportunities there are for recreational shellfishing, getting the kids involved and families, so could be a fun and interesting endeavor.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a very critical time to be there because we're in the process of doing the cleanup of Mill River.
Right.
That's going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years. The Shellfish Commission was very actively involved as we reviewed the sediment remediation plan and what was taking place with that. So you'll be able to kind of firsthand both witness that and help us make sure that it's done right.
Yeah,
So again,
excited.
thank you very much for your help here.
Great.
Any further questions from the board? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the consideration.
All right, item 9 on our agenda is to hear a report from the Greater Bridgeport Transit Authority. There's someone here to give it. Yes, here we are. Very good. Just come to the podium.
Thank
Now,
you.
I know you handed out some things earlier.
Yeah, I did left with Jennifer my comments tonight, plus some information about all the services. So,
And for our friends at home, if you'd be kind enough to introduce yourself.
sure, I'd be happy to. My name is Doug Holcomb. I'm the current Executive Director, General Manager at Greater Bridgeport Transit. I've been there for 3 years in this position, and before that, 11 in the Department of Planning and Service Development. So I'm not sure of the content. Thank you for inviting us here and having us on your agenda. It's all been interesting so far, and I hope I can shed some light on some of the services that we're currently doing. But I thought what I would do is give a 35,000-foot view, then specifics about what we're doing in Fairfield, and then when we're going. You can ask any questions that you have. I'll answer those whenever you want. Basically, from the 35,000-foot view, services are working very well. Ridership is 36 consecutive months of steady growth. A lot of people are choosing the bus now, and we've been very busy. And 2 years ago, the fiscal year, we finished with, 3 years ago, 5.2 million boardings in the year, and then the following year, 5.7 million, and 5.9 million in the year that just concluded in June. So for a lot of reasons, fuel prices, new jobs, new entry-level jobs, people opting to use the bus service for environmental reasons or other reasons. So in any case, it's part of a national trend. There was more than 10.6 billion trips on public transit in the previous year. So all in all, things are working very well. A little bit about the agency. It's established under state statutes. It's overseen by a board of commissioners that are 10 representatives, 4 from Bridgeport and 2 each from Fairfield, Stratford, and Trumbull. Those are the member municipalities. And we have a vacancy in Fairfield, so hopefully an appointment in a month from now we'll have someone appointed to it. And we have services that focus on Bridgeport with a hub in Bridgeport. They extend as far east or up the coast as Milford, where people connect to New Haven, the Connecticut Transit New Haven Division, as far down the coast to Norwalk, where people connect for Danbury and Stamford and Points West. And we have a lot of service now that's growing up into the valley, and newly introduced service nearly a year ago into Monroe on 25, to Clock Tower in Monroe. So the service is working very well. The funding for it predominantly comes from the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Operating budget is in the area of $21 million annually, and the capital budget, which is predominantly Federal Transit Administration money with 20% state match, it ranges anywhere from $1 million to 18 to 20 million, depending on what we're doing that year, replacing buses, that kind of thing. So we have a fleet of 57 city buses. I'm sure you see some here, and another smaller fleet of minibuses of 24 buses. And we're providing 3 different services. So let me tell you a little bit about what what services are on the street. I think that's probably the most important part of it. We provide the city bus service that you see every day, 7 days a week, holidays, weekends. We provide a minibus service for people with disabilities as a matter of civil rights. Any place that there's city bus service, there needs to be another service for people who, because of their disability, can't access the city bus. And then we provide, that's called GBT Access, and we provide a third service in town here through the municipal grant program. This is a state-funded formula grant to municipalities for transportation for seniors and people with disabilities. So all in all, as I mentioned, about 5.9 million boardings. But on the city buses, just on a few routes, because the routes most important to Fairfield, the people working in Fairfield and the employers in Fairfield would be our Route 10, which leaves downtown Bridgeport and turns around at Fairfield Woods and Stilson, so it's serving that commercial area of Black Rock Turnpike. There's another Coastal Link, which runs right through the middle of town, which is more than 100,000 boardings every month, and we jointly operate that with Norwalk and Milford Transit. That's about 51 boardings just in Fairfield, 51,000 boardings just in Fairfield alone. And the number 10 that I mentioned on Black Rock Turnpike, that's also around in the area of 51,000 boardings annually. And then we do, in the ADA service, I'm sorry, on the Route 7 service that leaves downtown Bridgeport, covers Commerce Drive and train station, the Black Rock station, and then the Fairfield Metro Center, and then terminates at Carlton Hospital. We're doing, I think, in the area of 12,000, 13,000 boarding. So they're very busy services. I think they're important to the communities and a lot of the residents, and certainly to the employers. On the paratransit side, we have more than 200 eligible Fairfield residents in that service, and we're providing, I just want to make sure I get the numbers right, around 15,000 trips that have an origin in Fairfield. It's hard to know, you know, who's taking the trips, but we know the origin of those trips. And then in the municipal grant program, which we coordinate with the senior center, we're doing maybe 700, 800 door-to-door trips, typically group trips, but not all group trips, coordinated through the senior center under that program. And for that, the town receives I think about a $66,000 grant from the DOT that it passes through to Greater Bridgeport Transit to run that service. Those people are being transported on the same fleet as the people under the ADA program. So those really are the three services. And a little bit about where we're heading. I don't know how much time I have, but we are just embarking on two tasks in a major transit-oriented development pilot project, and you may be familiar with from working with the GBRC. And we'll be looking at a long-range transit plan and also a high-frequency bus service plan that would, the service areas generally that we're considering now is from the Dock Shopping Center in Stratford to about the Fairfield Metro Center. What the corridor would be, I'm talking 10, 15-minute bus service. So that's generally where we're heading. So I thought I'd just share that with you and appreciate the time to give the report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions from the board?
Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you very much for this, and we just had, it's appropriate, we just had the Bike and Pedestrian Committee, it's the multimodal transportation.
Complete streets, yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
great the town has that committee now. That's
Yes.
well done.
So, well, thank you, and thanks for being here. The long-range transit plan, who do you speak with when you are planning to develop that? Will that be with each of the municipalities in conjunction with the representatives on the board? Will it be with the DOT?
Well, we
Who
have,
all will be involved in that?
we would be doing all of those things. The DOT kind of has a standing position on that committee. We have an oversight committee through the GBRC. So DOT's already been involved and been involved since we were trying to make a determination how the project would be funded. And then we can work with whomever you like at, you know, specifically in Fairfield, but always, the partnership really is with the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council, and they have connections in all of the municipalities. But we right now, we have a survey out on our website that is really, and I sent the link to Jennifer this morning, but it's really that we're really at the beginning trying to understand what people like, what they'd like to see, where they'd like to go. And kind of behind that, we're doing a lot of work in certain corridors where there's anticipated a lot of new development. Seaview Avenue corridor, in the area around the Stratford train station, perhaps on Commerce Drive and near the Fairfield Metro Center. So we have a lot to do, but the first public outreach meeting, and I'm glad you asked, is at the Holiday Inn in downtown Bridgeport. It's one of many, and that's on November 18th in the Harbor Room at 7 p.m. and it's open to the public, and we're getting a lot of good responses on the web-based survey. We're doing a lot of outreach in different places, jointly with GVRC. I think it's the first time our agency has really been partnering with GVRC this way. And I think we'll have a good outcome of something very meaningful and very doable out of the project.
Well, I thank you for that, because I lived in a place where I was able to easily take a bus. The frequency, the high-frequency service is a great thought, because obviously having options for people in terms of transportation is really tremendous. So I'm really excited to hear about both of the directions that you are headed in. That's wonderful.
Great. You know, the Coast Link is something to consider, because we're looking at 100,000 boardings a month, probably a little bit more than that, in this corridor, in a service that extends. This is a one-seat ride from Milford all the way to Norwalk, so it's very busy. A lot of people use it, and it is just another piece of the mobility infrastructure to go along with the train and the highway and you know, and the others. So.
I guess one last question, if I may. I think one of the issues that we face here in our community is a cultural one, in that the bus isn't an option that people usually think about taking. And there are a variety of reasons for that. I heard about that recently from folks who are over on the eastern side of town, maybe wanting to get from there to downtown.
Yes.
That in the old days, that there was service that was available in that direction. But how do you deal with that kind of cultural piece in terms of a marketing standpoint or outreach? Is that also going to be part of the long-range plan?
Well, we do. I mean, we do a lot of outreach. But before I talk about that, let me just address that crosstown piece, which we really don't have. The Route 7 now, we're given some. The Route 7 that runs on Commerce Drive and terminates at Carlton Hospital is really only morning and afternoon peak period. We're looking for resources at the state level to close that gap and have service all day. That alone will generate new riders. When people see that they have multiple options of when to arrive and depart, they tend to use it more often. So that's an important part. And we're also given some consideration of routing that down Kings Highway, which we currently don't have service. That we get a lot of requests. Well, we get enough requests to put that on the planning board. So we're doing that. In terms of cultural, we recently spent a lot of time, and I'll just talk about the Latino community, if that's the kind of thing that you're talking about. Everything we do now, from our Twitter, Facebook page, website, the outreach materials that you have, is bilingual English and Spanish. And while we're required to do this under our grant management process with FTA, we look at riders with limited English proficiency in whatever language. But in our region, particularly driven by Bridgeport, it's a high population of Spanish-speaking at home, approaching 40%. And so we went ahead and did all of our outreach material in that. And then there are other languages that we can make it available if people request. And one of the things that FTA wants us to do, and that we want to do for business reasons and for meeting the needs of the community, is reach out to those folks and let them know about the federal investment in the services in the area so that they can use them and take advantage of them. I do regular radio interviews on Radio Cumbre to reach out to that community as well. So are there other cultural things? Are you talking about people who are not...
Culturally speaking, in Fairfield, people...
You're talking about choice riders versus people that...
People take their cars or they get on the train, but people don't usually think of... A lot of people don't think about taking the bus. I know you have... You have a lot of riders and you're giving us data, but it's not something in day-to-day conversation that I hear about people saying, oh, maybe I'll take the bus downtown to go shopping.
Right, and I think that's a matter of how convenient it may be for them, and they're looking at that and the cost associated with doing that. But more and more, we're seeing riders, anecdotally I can say, that do have choices, that have a car and choose to take the bus, or take the bus when the weather isn't, good for them for driving. Lots of different reasons, and so we aim our marketing at all of those different groups and try to create a service that, in the end, the marketing is only a small part of it. If it's not convenient, not clean, not reliable, even if you get somebody on the bus the first time, they won't stay with you. So we're working on all of those areas. But another area is the use of new technology, and we have real-time bus tracking available on our website. And you can, this might be of interest to the listeners, but you can go out there, sign up, for free, certainly, and get an alert by email when the bus is going to cross your stop. So essentially, you go to our website and you say, I want to pick up the bus that's on Park Avenue at North and at 7:35, and say, give me an alert 15 minutes before that. And the system, in real time, not based on the schedule, because all the buses are GPS equipped, it'll tell you ahead of time that that bus is 5 minutes late. Take your time to get to the stop, or it's on time. So there's new technologies that are starting to bring what the industry would call choice riders into the service.
That's great. Maybe we should get that for the trains, too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Thank
there's
you.
no question that the transit agencies around the country, around the world really are doing a lot of this, and I think at the state level, there'll be a lot of the other transit agencies are doing it. You know, Norwalk is starting to do it, and it's going to become just like having a schedule in your hand. It's that commonplace. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, just quickly, Doug, thank you for being here, and thank you for the update as well. Quick question. You mentioned that you have a fleet of 81 vehicles, and I think you said 24 of them are minis, so the 57 are the longer
Right.
buses. Just quickly, how many, are all of those vehicles diesel, or are any of them moving toward natural gas? What does that evolution
Not
look like,
natural.
and how are you taking
Sure,
advantage of it?
Sure, not natural gas. Our facility is not equipped to maintain and store. All the buses are stored inside in our garage,
Okay.
and was designed in 1987. We have some plans underway to expand and improve the facility, and we may be able to do that, but we, along with some of the other transit providers in the state, are really leaning towards different clean propulsion systems. So of that fleet, 15 of them are new clean diesel, very efficient, very clean. In fact, and then we have 2 hybrid buses that we're testing, hybrid diesel electric buses.
Okay.
And we just had on site a test bus. It's called a ProTerra bus from South Carolina, which is full electric. It is a quick charge, so it would go from the terminal to, say, Trumbull Mall, back to the terminal. It would charge again for 6 minutes. So it would, and so in that sense, kind of a limitless range. So we're testing that, and we recently, the Department of Transportation programmed for us $13.4 million to buy clean, use congestion mitigation air quality money, highway money, flexed it to Federal Transit Administration money to allow us to buy the first, portion of our replacement fleet. So we have a fleet of 40 of those 57 need to be replaced, can start being replaced in late 2015, 2016. We will probably replace them over a 5-year schedule. And right now, maintenance is working with DOT, our maintenance staff working with DOT, developing specifications for not only different propulsion systems, but also some larger articulated buses.
Good. Well, thank you for that. And the only other comment I have is, you mentioned Kings Highway. With all the development that's going on there and proposed there, I mean, it does look like an area that could use some additional transportation options. So I would strongly encourage you to, think that way.
That's a big part of the plan. Okay,
Thank you.
great. You have my contact information anytime, just let me know. And thanks for the opportunity to talk to you
You
about
bet.
it.
No, thank you very much. All right, next up, from the Fairfield Museum and History Center. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Executive Director of the Fairfield Museum and the History Center. Resolved that Michael C. Tetro, first Selectman of the Town of Fairfield, is empowered to execute and deliver in the name and on behalf of the municipality a contract with the State of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development for a certified local government grant. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right. And I think I've got to provide some background here. Mike Jaley, Executive Director of the Fairfield Museum, wasn't able to be here today.
Okay.
He did ask that we pass this. This is going to the Board of Selectmen. This is to enable us, through the museum, to apply for a grant for approximately $10,000 to do a planning and traffic study for kind of the old Town Hall, Museum, and Burr Mansion area down here in terms of looking at our parking, our congestion, trying to mix both the historic need and kind of culture, tourism center with the current day needs of our town hall and town government. So that's really what this is all about. It's not about, it's a grant, authorization to do a grant application. The state requires that the Board of Selectmen approve this. I think that's about all I know, but I will try and answer any questions I can. Go ahead.
Just a comment more than anything. I'm in support of this. I know that there have been times when I've been here, held meetings here where the parking overflow has impacted the museum complex. I think there's a theme going on here. It's about how we move and get around today. I think it's great that they're working to get out to get some grant funding. So I'm supportive of this going forward.
I agree, it sounds like a good process to get started, and thanks for bringing it forward.
Okay. And also, this is the grant application. The grant
Right.
itself
Right.
will still come
Right.
before the board, so I don't mean to push that beyond that.
Got it.
And thank you for your understanding. Mike Jaley, again, apologizes for his not being able to be here to help us see this through. All right. So with that, do I need to repeat this, or may I have a motion to accept? Or do we have
You
that?
moved. It was moved.
Was it moved in a second already? All right. Any further discussion by the board? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Next up will be the Penfield Building Committee. And the resolution before us is to hear, consider, and adopt a bond resolution appropriating funds for the repair of the Penfield Pavilion and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation. A copy hereto is attached. We have several presenters here today. We have the Building Committee, and I just want to take a moment and thank the Building Committee for their job, their efforts, and the amount of time they spent on this, and the number of options they've reviewed, the amount of documentation, and just the thorough job that they've done throughout this to make sure that all the options were heard and that they were thoroughly evaluated. They worked with Joe Michelangelo and a team from our DPW group. They worked with Bob Mayer and our finance team, who got very much involved, and we'll hear part of the presentation from them on the financing options. And they also worked with Jerry Lombardo and the Parks and Rec Commission, and Jerry will have a few comments as we go through this presentation. And Mr. Bradley, I believe the Building Committee is up first to kick this off.
So, I'm definitely in the way, so this is going to go along with the
can slide
PowerPoint
down.
presentation for the most part? Okay, so I'll just take my
You wanna-
notepad.
Do we want to move to the other
Out?
side?
Do you want to just slide down? There's plenty of room.
Well,
I'm not sure we can see it from that angle.
I can go sit over there next to Mr. Michelangelo if that's okay, just so I can see.
Yeah, and I
If
think I
that's
may
all right.
join you on that side also.
Don't move it.
You know,
I guess so.
if I sit like this for half an hour. No, she's going up there.
I was mistaken in the angles. I'm coming with you. I think we may have to bring our chairs around.
Okay, right now.
No, it's all right here.
And then
I'll go sit right there. Is there room right there?
Yeah. Congratulations, by the way. I was talking so much I forgot to say that.
First things first.
Yeah.
Are you gonna need the trifold, Kevin? Kevin, do you need the trifold stand? Do you need the stand?
After we get your presentation, I can put it up on that.
If we need it, I'm going to go, I'm going to let whoever he is, our first selectman, I'm going to let him make up his mind what he wants to use out of this. This isn't a bomb in here, is it?
No,
Oh.
no. That's my bad. Did you see the numbers? Did you see the analysis they did? No. That's 1A, 1B. I know, I am on it.
That's why I said we don't do that.
No, I'm saying it's crazy.
I do have a tracking list of all the options. They're like 12 total. And they have it, I'm not going to distribute it. I've always kind of kept it as a... So, I was thinking, what?
If you don't mind going ahead, I would be grateful.
Okay.
You just tell
I guess we're going to begin?
Yeah, you just tell me when you want to flip.
Okay, good. Thank you. We are going to begin. Good afternoon. I'm Jim Bradley, Chair of the Penfield Building Committee. And I'm here this afternoon with members of the committee and Kevin Chamberlain, the project engineer retained by the committee to present our recommended option to reconstruct and repair the Penfield Building facility and request appropriate funding for the project. Our presentation includes a written report to the Board of Selectmen, a PowerPoint presentation that provides a summary of the issues considered by the committee as it researched and debated various Penfield repair options, and a cost summary sheet that provides cost comparison regarding options 1, 7, 8, and 9. All documents are dated October 30th and were reviewed by the committee at a special meeting on the same date. The committee continues to assume that funding sources, program justification, and support for the program at the pavilion will be presented by others. The report to the Board of Selectmen dated October 30th, 2014, the PowerPoint presentation and the cost summary have been previously provided and we assume distributed to appropriate parties. As you are aware, the committee was prepared to report to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM in September, however, elected to delay our presentations after hearing public concerns and requests for the committee to consider a low-cost or no-cost repair options. During September, the committee, the project engineer, and the construction manager researched, developed scope and cost criteria, and discussed two additional options. The first being complete demolition of the existing facility and reworking of the site contours, and the second being complete demolition of the existing facility and designing and building a new, smaller pavilion that would not include the event space. And I was going to ask the first selectman or remaining selectmen, I can go through the report and read it, which might send most people to sleep, or I can go through the PowerPoint presentation which has many of the issues related to the report.
Do the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Great. We could have done that if the chair.
Okay, fine.
I said the PowerPoint. I think we should start with the PowerPoint.
I think that's a great idea.
And then if there's further conversation with you.
Yeah, the PowerPoint basically summarizes what we've presented to the Board of Selectmen previously, and is a good overview. The subtleties, if you talk about different options, we'll be able to infill as a committee, and Kevin will be able to infill from an engineering standpoint. So why don't we go? The presentation agenda, I'll just let you quickly look at that. That's what we're going to present through the PowerPoint, from the committee charge all the way through to bulkhead improvements. Next slide. There have been some discussions about the committee charge. I just want to confirm that the committee has always stuck to their charge, reviewed it periodically, and we have gone through the recommended options. We've complied with the charge as far as research and talking to different agencies and entities and experts. We went through 12 options, and we've narrowed them down to 7, then narrowed them down to 3, then narrowed them down to 1. And we have one option which we're recommending. Yes, next slide. Just quickly, the history, which I think many people in this room know, when the facility was purchased, Phase 1, when that was approved and built, and the RTM vote in that for Phase 1. And the same thing for Phase 2, the West Wing, which includes the rental hall, kitchen, restrooms, first aid, and lifeguard. The rental hall, event space, catering hall are all used simultaneously in all kinds of letters and minutes and correspondence. So when we say rental, we mean the event space, or we mean the catering area. Next slide. Tropical Storm Irene, we're bringing this forward tonight just to give you an idea about this particular storm. High winds, astronomical high tides, and a storm surge, but very low wave energy. It's interesting to note that the building was damaged by that particular storm, and that it was undermined, and interestingly enough, it was undermined pretty much the same way it was with Sandy. The water came off the parking lot, down through a hole near the front entrance steps, coursed diagonally underneath the building, and came out and undermined the footings, not anywhere nearly as badly as Sandy, but undermined the footings on the Long Island Sound side by the main entrance. Next slide. The cure after after Storm Irene was certain footings that were undermined were underpinned. You can see the fire department members there, I believe that's who that is, jacking up the footings. They were underpinned, which means that concrete was added in the void between the bottom of the footing and the existing sand. The protective bulkhead was designed and constructed. You can see a picture of it there. And the building structure was repaired and reopened. There were certain recommended modifications which were not completed in time for the arrival of Sandy, and that was that the existing footings should have some form of protection around them, and the possibility of a slab formed and poured underneath the building to protect the footings from overtopping floodwaters and scour. And there were a couple of other minor issues that were suggested. Tropical Storm Sandy we're all very, very aware of. These are photographs that have been around for a while. Category 2 hurricane, downgraded to a post-tropical storm, but high winds and a significantly high storm surge until about 10:30 that night, when the wind shifted about 5 or 10 degrees, and things could have been worse. Could you go back to just 1 second? To go back to the bulkhead, it's interesting from having a background in this that the bulkhead stayed as strong, and it was obviously well designed and well built. That's a typical example of the problem with the bulkhead. You can see on the top left slide that, hopefully from your vantage point, that there's the slot, there are the famous weir boards, there are 7 openings in the bulkhead. They were left that way or constructed that way to allow easy passage to the beach rather than steps and stairs and a platform over the bulkhead. So what happened was that the weir boards did not go all the way down to the toe of the sheeting, and it left an opening about 5 feet by 5 feet approximately. And between the beach eroding in front of the bulkhead and the buildup of liquefied sand and water on the shores, on the building side of the bulkhead, it finally broke through, a classic failure of a seawall or a bulkhead when the water finally finds its way from the back, interestingly enough, underneath the bottom of the bulkhead or underneath the bottom of the wall. The other 2 photographs are just simply from the file. One of them shows, the lower left shows the water still coursing out from the hole in the bulkhead, and the cut that it made in the beach, pretty significant. And then obviously the other picture is the storm waves, not at the peak of the storm. I think, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, that was midday and the tide never really went down? Correct. Yeah. These are pictures which many of you have seen. These are the famous undermined footings, photographs taken right after the storm, before the footings were cribbed up or shored up or blocking put underneath them so that they didn't continue to stress the building. A significant plus for this building is you don't often see a building capable of holding all that concrete. These are only a few of the footings. And it's surprising that that building was strong enough to overcome the down drag or the drag, the pulling down created by these footings. The existing spread footings perform poorly. The loss of beach sand behind the bulkhead liquefied. Sand surrounding and under the footings eroded and scoured. The existing bulkhead opening provided a convenient channel, which is what I just said previously. The impact on the pavilion we've all heard about and read about. There was significant foundation settlement. The foundation settlement, not only did it damage the footings, but it also damaged the structure. On the upper left-hand picture photograph, that's what's called a glue lam beam, and it's become delaminated. The picture on the left is just to show you, picture on the right is just to show you the scale of the floor settlement in one particular area. That's in scale about 5 inches, and those galvanized looking rods are actually BX cable, and the question before us is going to be opening up the walls to make sure that the cables, the electrical system, that the wiring was not stretched and pulled out of boxes or left under tension in some way. The committee, when we got started, recommended several make-safe measures which were already underway with the Department of Public Works. We added security fencing. The building department was very concerned about people having access to the building and being around the building. We initiated the inspection of the gas and electrical systems. We initiated, or the town did, installation of an alarm and security system. I had visions of the classic bunch of 12-year-olds on a fall day or a spring day walking the beach and thinking, wouldn't it be great to get in that building and maybe have a cookout? So then we temporarily removed the gathering hall glass. Here it's called the gathering hall, was also known as event space and catering space, but all those glass panels on the Long Island Sound side were taken out and stored for reuse so that they wouldn't pop, or if there's any kind of a extraneous wind load in there that we might be unaware of. Especially if the beach is being used, you don't want glass in an area where there are people moving around. We also agreed to and expedited, and the Public Works completed, Department of Public Works completed, and engineering, the closure of the openings in the bulkhead. That bulkhead is now one continuous element without any holes in it, and the closures were per the bulkhead design. They weren't weir boards. Now it's just one continuous bulkhead. We did that primarily because we were concerned about a storm coming in the fall and just making things worse. The kind of Murphy's Law. Our research and due diligence, as previously reported to this board and Parks and Rec, we have had great resources all the way back to the J.M. Albane engineering reports and letters and correspondence, Heller and Johnson, Robert's Associates, all the information in the beginning, including viewing the public meeting that was conducted in August of 2013. We did have the benefit of the 3 estimates for the storm damage insurance claim. They all are slightly different, so we had to do some correlation there, but at least it was good background. And we actually included during the interviews of the proposed construction manager and the engineer, we asked them to come forward with ideas. So if they wanted to work for the town of Fairfield, they had to show up and think through the problems we had. We didn't necessarily need answers. We just wanted to know how interested they were in the project. And of course, obviously, public input. We've gotten plenty of that. We did have presentations to the committee, and I apologize if everybody's already seen this and knows this because we've said it so many times, but these are the major players during the first 5.5 month period of the committee's being in session. By the way, we have been meeting twice a month, and so we had personal, full-blown presentations by this particular list of departments, entities, individuals, and I have to say, as I've said previously, that the cooperation from the town has been first class up and down the line, and particularly the Conservation Department, a great presentation on the beach, where it's going, where it's coming from, how the sands, how it's a net loss on the beach as far as the sand is concerned. So we spent 5.5 months with that group of individuals, departments, and entities. Next. Factors considered. I don't really have to. Well, maybe I will go through the whole list, but obviously the extent of foundation damage, the cause of the damage, the contributing factors, the feasibility repairs, the existing site and soil conditions, the footing depths, coastal storm impacts, alternate foundation designs, how to protect the building in the future if necessary, FEMA, which is a place that I just would rather not go because you just go to their website and you feel like all you do is look for a window to jump out of. Beach accretion and loss, going back to Tom Stanky's presentation, existing bulkhead location and performance, facility site impact on neighborhood flooding, constructability and project safety. I just want to say something about that particular one. A lot of people don't understand it, but the committee was particularly conscious with in concert with the construction manager of not coming up with some kind of a scheme that was going to be a high risk to the people actually repairing the building. And some of the schemes, some of the scenarios envisioned the building being put up on blocking, on cribbing, 6 feet higher than it is now, where it is now. So when you talk about constructability is a decision to raise the building in place so that you can have access to the footings underneath it for auger piles or other types of piles. There was absolutely no support or enthusiasm for putting that building 6 feet in the air right where it is, right next to Long Island Sound, with the blocking and footing on the very sand that was a problem to begin with. The idea being that it would be just Fairfield's luck to have a storm come, and they apparently come anytime they want. It used to be fall was the season for hurricanes, but we could have one in the spring. And all of a sudden we have a building which is the cribbing undermining and the building at risk. And so those are the kind of things that fall under that category. We talked about building height and mass and the impact on the neighborhood. Obviously, have been very conscious of cost, very conscious of cost. We did talk about cost recovery and funding resources and decided to get out of that business and turn it over to the First Selectman's office and the Chief Fiscal Officer. We did have two presentations on the insurance claim, and we obviously spent a lot of time on schedule and trying to maintain a schedule. We reviewed 11 design options, and as this slide notes, 3 options were added after the August 14th meeting where we presented the options, option 7, which is recommended, and we received a lot of public comment. The 4 design options that are were given final consideration: repair and protect the existing building, which is essentially to repair it to the insurance company's scope of work, which is option 1. The complete demolition and site reconstruction, which is option 8. And demolition and construction of a smaller facility, which is 9. And then our recommended option, modify and raise the west wing and demolish the east wing. Just quickly, the insurance company's estimate of appraised value is $5,400,000. There's all of us, many of you I know, are beach area, so you know, everybody seems to know, should know, that if repair costs exceed 50% of the appraised value, then you have to comply with the current FEMA standard. And the current FEMA standard for this site is, it's now been designated a V zone, which means the building, if it's constructed or repaired or modified to FEMA standards, would have to be raised 3.5 feet. So the coastal and structural engineering recommendation was the building should be supported on new flood-resistant pile foundation system. We've had a lot of discussions about, am my eye slowly going, or is that in focus?
It's as good as it gets for this sketch.
Outspoken committee
How's
member.
that?
We have been using this slide. This is really for background to help understand some of these issues, because there's been the committee's published a lot of information, and you can go through the committee's information and take a word from one document, 2 sentences from another document, and some dollars from another document, and make up whatever you want. But in the real world, these are the conditions that we have been wrestling with. The first one on the far left shows in a schematic format here. This is to scale and relationship, but not showing exactly the exact existing conditions. So these are relationships. The first one is the footing that is founded on what is alleged to be and reported to be, and I'm sure is, at least 4 feet of sand before you come across that dark brown band, which is the famous peat, or deleterious material, or bog, or mud. It exists throughout the site, throughout the beach, and it exists underneath the building, with the exception of the west wing, where it was removed and replaced with sand. So the west wing is the second condition from the left, and there the sand has been replaced, and the lighter brown sand, the lighter brown color, by the way, is the dense, compact sand, which is what you really would like the building sitting on. The third one over is what you see today. That much material has been scoured out, and you can see symbolically the blocking underneath the footing. So if you really wanted to keep it simple in your mind, the east wing is sitting on the far left configuration. The next one over is what we think is the west wing, and then the next one over is the actual west wing today for about 60% of the footings. Some aren't totally exposed like that, like the photographs, but many of them are, and some of them are partially what the insurance company calls damaged or undermined. The far right is a cross section. These are all cross sections, but the far right is the timber pile solution, the right way, the engineered way at the moment for solving the problem to FEMA requirements at the FEMA elevation. So you can see the floor, which is the top of that brown tee, has been raised up. Below it you see in gray the concrete foundation elements. Below the concrete foundation elements you see the timber pile in green, and that pile has driven down through any poor material, loose material, through the peat and down and found it in the coarse and compacted sand below. Miss anything?
When you came to us the last time, you talked a little bit more about the pile technology. Could you refresh us on that? Like, what are other construction sites or builders using? And, you know, the pile construction methodology has been around for quite a while, I think you had mentioned, and it still seems to be the most used or sturdiest construction method out there.
The beachfront standard, the standard in the industry, mostly because of cost, is a pressure-treated timber pile, driven in place. In this particular project, probably 100 or 150 of them.
In rough numbers, it's
Yeah,
100.
and there has been discussion, and the committee debated, costed out, and discussed helical piles. You might have heard that, and that would be where you would leave the footing in place. Well, there's a lot of different ways to use helical piles, but the way we discussed it was to leave these damaged footings in place, drive or screw in helical piles adjacent to the footing, make a connection between the pile and the footing. Helical pile looks just like a corkscrew, or it's a flight. It looks more like a, what does it look like? An auger. And they actually are augered into the ground. They are effective, being used for tiebacks and being used as support piles, and I can only add parenthetically a very strong marketing effort on behalf of the helical pile guys. There are sectional piles. You could go underneath the building if you raised it up and left it where it is. You could drive sectional piles, which you would then fill with concrete. I think you'd use probably 6-footers, 5 or 6 footers, hollow pipe, drive it in, get a machine, a rig, a pile driver underneath the building, drive down a piece, connect the next one, drive it down, connect the next one, drive it down, and then fill it with concrete. And I think reinforcing, if I'm not mistaken. And those you'd probably try to core through the footing or somehow attach the footing or make a supplemental concrete arrangement underneath the footing. So helical piles, sectional piles, timber piles, as you can see from the beach and all along the northeast coastline, all along the east coast, when there's a problem, the first thought is to move the building off, drive the piles, and move the building back. It's a known technique. I don't know how many hundreds of years, but timber piles have been driven a long time. Yes?
Just to expand on that.
This is Kevin Chamberlain.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin Chamberlain with Stefano and Chamberlain. We're the project engineer for the building committee. We did look at an option where we tried to do a repair under the building and actually lift it up high enough to be able to work under it. There were a few concerns with that. One was the safety of doing that, given the nature of the eroded area under the center of the west wing. You would have to lift it a lot higher than we would need to for flood reasons, just to be able to have working room underneath it. The other problem is that the existing footings where they have been undermined, they're not really suitable to be anchored to a new pile because they're not at the same elevation they were originally at, and they're just kind of floating there. The other thing to keep in mind is that we would need probably 4 times as many piles if we did that, because at each and every footing, just for stability, we would need 4, one in each corner. Whereas if we are kind of starting over with the foundations, we need a lot fewer piles. Now, we did also look at an alternate on that drawing to the right, where we did pick the building up, clear out everything underneath it, and go with new piles, grade beams, and so forth, using the helical piles that Mr. Bradley mentioned. But there was no significant savings in doing that because, again, we needed a significant larger number of piles to do the same job. So the timber piles are very economical, been around a long time, very reliable, and in our opinion, they're the best choice for this site and this building.
Thanks, guys.
And keep in mind that if, as you trip the FEMA threshold, 50% of appraised value, and you have to comply with FEMA, everything changes for you because you have to comply with the height of the building as well as the design of the foundation, which means going down to a certain mandatory level, which is what brings piles into the picture aside from a better alternate as far as scour in the future. Okay. I think everybody's aware that FEMA changed the flood zone in 2013. It went from AE to V, high velocity zone, and you can see the two difference in elevations. Next. This is maybe hard to read from a distance, but this is in our report, and it's simply a section through the site that calls out all the different elevations, because there's been a lot of back and forth and correspondence about what elevation is what and so forth. So going across there, and I won't belabor it, but I won't put you to sleep with all the details, but it's Long Island Sound on the left at high tide all the way out to the parking lot on the right, showing the proposed grades of the building. And this is an important bit of information when it comes to attempting to reduce the risk of flooding in the neighborhood. The site will be going up about 2 feet higher than it is today. I think the underneath the building is 9.5.
Yes, it goes up between 2 and 3 feet.
The site has been a risk point for the neighborhood because once the building was set the way it is, there's no way to fill underneath it and have the building be combination sand and building foundations, which form a kind of an informal dike. Our plans with recommended option 7 is to bring the site up to plus 12. Next slide. So just very quickly, we had the 4 remaining options. Option 1, which is repair in place, underpinning the footings, which means putting concrete under, filling that void, placing a layer. Our recommendation, based on engineering comments that were made from Race, the coastal engineer that examined the building after it was damaged, a blanket of surge stone underneath the west wing, and construct a bulkhead across the north parking lot side of the building. That means that the footings would be repaired. Again, we're talking about the foundation. The footings would be repaired, meaning concrete underneath them to fill in the voids. Then the area would be graded under the building, not an easy task, and then a layer of crushed stone would be put underneath the building. Again, we're talking about the west wing. And then a bulkhead or a low wall along the parking lot so that the protection underneath the building would be trapped in a box. Just think of it as 18 inches of crushed stone in various sizes, graded crushed stone, being contained by the bulkhead so that if water were rushing out across the parking lot, that it couldn't get under the stone blanket. I don't think it would anyway, but the bulkhead is one way of approaching that. The cost, the schematic design is the criteria of the estimate, means it's better than a conceptual estimate, $3,222,000. Certainly the pros on this option are low cost if the FEMA threshold is not exceeded, No impact to the town programming, reuse, obviously reuse of the facility, and the operating income is not impacted. The cons are shallow spread footings would remain, the repaired building not FEMA compliant, and the risk of reoccurrence of damages from a storm like Sandy. Final cost could exceed the FEMA threshold, and the high cost risk of the scope of work. What we're saying there is that when you are underneath the building and you are attempting to do what the insurance company wants, and that is dig out underneath the footing to find decent bearing sand. You couldn't put concrete right under that void, underneath the footing, right on top of the existing sand. You'd have to get it, you'd have to excavate to the point where the sand was sound. So a geotechnical engineer would have to be at your side with your crew, and you'd have to take one of these very large footings, excavate, crib up so that the building was supported, and the footing was supported, take the blocking out from under the footing, go underneath it, and in sections form and pour concrete. That's a typical underpinning. That operation could unravel cost-wise. It's just the nature of running sand, working in sand, a high water table. So there's a high cost risk for that scope of work, and the engineering team does not recommend this foundation repair for reconstruction. I might add that the investigating engineer, JMA, also does not recommend using the footings, and as does Heller and Johnson and Race. So we're in good company. Most of our consulting engineers, or our consulting engineers that we work with, are basically saying this is a significant risk to leave the building at its elevation on spread footings. Next. We did look at, after the public comment at our open public meeting in August, the end of August, we did glean from that two options to drive the costs down. One is to completely remove the pavilion for $800,000, $808,000. The next one. And obviously the pros and cons are pretty easy to figure out. It's obviously the lowest cost option. There is some site protection because we would be regrading the beach back up to plus 12 along on the north side of the beach from Durrell to Rickards Beach. The cons are, I don't even have, their existing town asset is demolished. The loss of town programming space creates safety and convenience issues because of the distance of the next first aid station or lifeguard or bathrooms. The other option we considered as a suggestion from the public session and also from correspondence was, what about taking the existing building down, both wings, and building a FEMA-compliant, typical pavilion, shorefront pavilion. And a typical shorefront pavilion is basically one that provides food, a limited menu like lunch, snack bar, a lot of people call it, restrooms, showers, changing rooms, day lockers, lifeguard station, pretty much what you have in the West Wing without the event space. So we looked at that pretty carefully, and this is to demolish the existing and build a new smaller one, $2,860,000. The pros and cons, obviously it's not the lowest, but it's a low-cost option. The facility, this new smaller pavilion would be built to FEMA standards. It stays within the existing footprint, so we wouldn't have to go back. So planning and zoning would be a administrative action, and obviously because it's FEMA compliant, low risk. For future flood damage, the cons, the existing town asset, big pavilion, not utilized. Current town programming is restricted with the loss of revenue and additional schedule impacts. We would have to start from scratch regarding designing a new pavilion, and we would have to go through town administrative approval. We did not obviously recommend this one. Option 7 has been discussed a lot, presented to this board twice, and to Parks and Rec once. That is to demolish the east wing, and demolishing the east wing was driven by the fact that the building movers informed us through Shawmut, our construction manager, that frankly it would be cheaper to tear the east wing down and rebuild it than it would be to jack it up and move it, because of its type of construction, light framing and wood trusses. It's really light compared to if it were 2 stories or compared to the gathering hall. We would obviously demolish all the exterior decks. We would tear them off and reconstruct them, salvage as much of the material as possible. Would then lift and move the west wing into the parking lot. It sounds difficult, but when you take all the decks and everything off and you're just dealing with the occupied west wing, it's a small building compared to what commercial building movers are used to move. They've been on site, they have no problem with moving it. Then while it was sitting in the parking lot, you would be working on that building as far as structural underneath and repairs inside. And then you also simultaneously would be driving piles and building a new foundation for the west wing. This option includes taking out the low, you saw one of them, these glue lam beams that had split, and the term is letting in or cutting in steel. So the horizontal support members, structural members for the floor. So there's an advantage in this, there's a kind of a building upgrade embedded in this, for the floors, embedded in this particular option. And then of course, we on this option and the others, we assume a berm or a sand dune created from Rickards Beach to Durrell at as minimum of plus 12. As I think I've been through this, we repair any damage. This particular option includes an addition of restrooms, a small addition on the end of the west wing, in part of the area where the east wing was, of restrooms, changing area, day lockers, and exterior decking. Kevin's going to give you a quick look at that, and you'll see that it's a pretty impressive solution. We're going to fill beneath and around the building and bring the grade up, which you can't do with where the building is now. There's some on-grade decking, which will show up in the drawings, and new ramps and stairs. The cost estimate is $4,558,000. I might note that this particular estimate is based on design development documents, which means actually some drawings, which the committee does not have for other options. Because, as we know from our school projects, drawings are money. And so you have this constant trade-off of spending just a little bit more to get enough documentation to get a decent estimate. This we have some documentation for, or Shawmut had some documentation for. The pros: minimal risk, existing town asset is reused, original amenities are in place, FEMA standards are met, increased parking, I think there's 10 additional spaces under option 7, and obviously the engineer's opinion that that the design will reduce the risk for future storm damage. Also note that the FEMA officer for the town and the building department have both signaled that this is the preferred option for the town of Fairfield. In other words, a FEMA-compliant, pile-supported building. The building inspector, in particular, wants something better than there. I mean, he hasn't officially come down because he doesn't have a set of plans to look at. But the cons here are obviously a higher cost and the reduction in programming because of the removal and income because of the removal of 200 lockers. We do recommend this, and we've recommended it all along, and it has survived a lot of tests as other options have come up, and we voted 7-1-0 for this particular option in August, So July? July. July. Yeah, I think, given the length of this whole thing, if you could just give us a quick, just maybe hold it right on the edge of the table, let everybody take a quick look.
So I don't knock anybody over with this big board here. Excuse me. Oops. That's a different option. Okay. Second. This rendering shows part of the existing building and part of what we're proposing. This wall right here is the boundary between what's known as the west wing and the east wing. So the proposal is to tear off the east wing that Mr. Bradley mentioned is very inexpensive construction. It would cost more to move it than to reconstruct it. Currently, the east wing extends all the way down here, kind of following the shape of the bulkhead that was built after Irene. We would also tear off the existing exterior decks on the west wing, again, because it's less expensive to move a smaller building, and it can easily be replaced. So we'd move the building into the parking lot, dry piles, pour concrete for the foundations, which are grade beams and piers, things that make the transition from the pile to the building. Then move the building back. The west wing, from this demising wall to the west, would all stay essentially as is. You have the gathering room, the large hallway that wraps around the entry and connects the restrooms to serve the gathering room. You have the office. We would not need the connecting hallway to what is currently the east wing, so that can become a storage room. We're proposing to rebuild a much smaller east wing, essentially just 2 bathrooms, which would have space for changing, showers, and the other, normal bathroom facilities. The rest of the west wing, heading towards the playground area, it would remain unchanged. We still have the concession, we still have the kitchen, the warming kitchen, men's and women's rooms, first aid, and lifeguard. We would still have a structured deck that is at the rear of the gathering room, which continues on to the concession area, as well as the bathroom area and first aid area. So you'd still have a covered deck facing the water at the back of the building. We would expand that around this new east wing so that for traffic in and out of the building, you have this continuous traffic flow. It also helps us to link all the exterior decks around the 4 sides of the building for handicap access. We're trying to minimize the visual impact of having a whole mess of ramps. What we're looking to do is keep the ramp that's currently starting in the parking lot. We have to break it off from the building at the corner of the lifeguard shack because the building is going up 3.5 feet. We would then continue the ramp parallel with the front of the building and link back up with the front entrance porch. On the east end of the building, we would have a similar set of ramps that gets up to the deck off the new bathroom and changing rooms. We would do that in 2 tiers to break up the amount of ramping, just so it doesn't look like one big monster ramp. Generally speaking, the accessibility to the beach for wheelchairs, wagons, and other wheeled items would be at both ends of the building. That's certainly something that can be expanded as the design develops with other ramp locations as the committee and the town see fit. We wind up with this large area to the east of what we would rebuild that's available for recreational purposes, and I think Jerry can chime in on that when he speaks. We would also pick up some room between the edge of the existing parking lot and the front face of the building for about 10 additional parking spaces. From a standpoint of flood mitigation for the property, the proposal is to armor the existing timber bulkhead with boulders for a couple of reasons. One is to deflect wave energy that's coming up the beach towards the building, and also to create a continuous elevation 12, as Mr. Bradley mentioned, that connects from Rickards Beach around the water side of the building over to Durrell Pavilion. It was not necessary to extend that all the way around the playground, just because currently the beach is already up at elevation 12 where the playground is. Because we're losing some of the structured deck, so in other words, the deck that's up off the ground and supported on foundations, we're proposing to make that up with less expensive decking that's actually on grade, so that you have a transitional area between the beach surface and the building floor. It's about halfway in between. The exact shape of this can be refined as the program needs are more focused in as the design develops. But we see it as an area for seating, passive recreation, possibly an expansion of the decking area available for functions using the gathering room. The other component, which is not developed yet, would be some landscaping to soften the look of the building because it's 3.5 feet higher in the air.
You have the elevations?
I do, in fact.
Yeah, if you wouldn't, I think it's important to take just a quick explanation on the proposed elevations. Thank you. Yeah.
So the significant visual impact to this work is that the building isn't as long as it used to be, obviously, because much of it is being taken away, and it is higher than it used to be. As Mr. Bradley mentioned, the grade under the building would be raised. That not only helps us from a standpoint of trying to continue the berming effect of the site, but also gives us an intermediate level that can be landscaped between the parking lot grade and the first floor of the building. You know, what we didn't want to see was a building that had this full story high grade change from the ground to the first floor. We wanted to have an intermediate level to soften the look.
So they're basically 3 elevations. Finished floor, the first elevation, correct? You have
That's right.
finished floor, first elevation. Go quickly, just go through each.
Okay, yes. So the first floor would be up at elevation 14.5.
In the required.
Right. The flood elevation, just for frame of reference, is 13. So that's the crest of the wave as it's coming onto the site. So we have to have the underside of our floor structure above that. The intermediate level that's under the building would be between elevation 10.5 and 11.5. Parking lot varies, but it's anywhere from elevation 6.5 to elevation 8. So between the parking lot and the first floor of the building, we're coming up about 9 feet.
So to sum up, the committee, after studying 12 different options, including several variations to single options, has voted to recommend to the Board of Selectmen, in accordance with its charge, a series of recommendations which we have outlined tonight, and a series of options, I'm sorry, with a specific recommendation. And our specific recommendation is option 7, and we have voted on that and reconfirmed that, and we also voted on a request for funding which was forwarded to the Board of Selectmen. So that concludes, sorry for the length of it, but that concludes our presentation, unless you have anything else to add, Kevin?
Any questions?
You get it
So
up.
we're going to take a quick 2-minute break and then come back. We've got, there's 3 parts to this. The next one would be from Parks and Rec, get an explanation on why this is an important part of the program, and then we'll step into the finances. So we'll have questions at the end of those, so we can ask questions on all 3 components if we need to, but we'll have the answer, we'll have a presentation for all 3 to help. So 2-minute break. We'll be right back. You ready to go? If I can call the meeting back to session, thank you for all staying in your seats. And the next part, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Moreau to kind of continue, if you'll introduce yourself and your role.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Moreau. I live at 105 Mountain Laurel Road here in Fairfield, and I'm the chairman of the Parks and Rec Commission. I'm here tonight to share with you the need for the Penfield Pavilion and the value it adds to our community, and why the Parks and Rec Commissioners voted overwhelmingly to support reconstruction of the original Penfield facility without the lockers, as Mr. Bradley just went through. In the late 1880s, 26 Fairfield residents organized the Fairfield Beach Company, and a pavilion was built at the site of Penfield 1. While it was mostly a private club, its memberships were available to Fairfield residents. The pavilion later became known as the Sun Haven Beach Club. In 1978, the town purchased the Sun Haven Beach Club to be used as a public beach club for its residents. It housed lockers, a gathering room, a concession stand, as well as an apartment. This facility has been in operations for well over 100 years. The vision of the town has always been to provide all our residents the opportunity to appreciate the feeling of belonging to a beach club with easy and affordable access to all the amenities that such membership might provide. We know that Fairfield is a wonderful waterfront community that offers 5 beautiful beaches. However, these beaches are all very different. Jennings Beach, the largest of the beachfronts, offers a large beachfront for swimming with areas for beach volleyball, bonfires, sailing, and the storage of sailboats and catamarans. This beach has a small building with a small covered deck which houses a concession stand, restrooms, and a first aid lifeguard station. Southport, South Pine Creek, and Sasco beaches are small waterfronts with limited parking. They offer only restrooms and first aid lifeguard stations. Penfield is a unique facility and a source of pride and enjoyment for so many. It is fully handicap accessible and has not only concessions, restrooms, first aid, lifeguard station, but also a welcoming pavilion that provides respite from the sun for our youngest citizens, the babies and toddlers who accompany their parents, to our senior citizens who seek the pavilion as a place to gather, sit, read, and enjoy being near the water, even if they cannot physically walk or sit on the sand. Penfield is one of the few resources in town that caters to all age groups in all areas of Fairfield. As noted in a recent issue of Money Magazine, one of the reasons Fairfield, Connecticut was named one of the top 50 small towns to live in the nation was due to its 5 miles of beaches. Penfield has been the jewel in our crown, and without it, Fairfield's shoreline would look pretty much like any other town that sits along the coast of Long Island. Penfield is also by far the busiest beach facility due to these amenities, and it produces revenue with the rental of its gathering room and concession stand. The gathering room at Penfield has been used by thousands of people per year who attend weddings, birthday parties, business meetings, school fundraisers, and town special events such as the family fun dances, summer band concerts, and teen events. To be able to provide a facility where our residents can congregate at a reasonable cost in such a beautiful setting is significant, but the fact that it is by far our largest revenue producer is what makes it so vital to the entire town. The revenue generated at this facility has been and would be used for a dual purpose of helping to cover our expense budget as well as to defray any debt service. As we weigh the options here tonight, my fellow commissioners and I would like you to hear some of the thought processes that went into our decision to support the recommendations presented to us from the Building Committee. The Penfield Building Committee presented several options to the Parks and Rec Commission at our meeting on July 16, 2014. And at subsequent meetings, we were given updates as the Building Committee continued its work. We understand the options primarily to be, number one, fix and repair the present facility in place. Although the Commission would prefer this option and simply replace the building that was just recently renovated, we were informed that to fix and repair on the same type foundation at the same height may not be approved by a structural engineer and would leave the facility at risk. The Commission felt that this was, in our opinion, not even an option. Number 2, complete demolition of the facility with no amenities. To offer no amenities at a beachfront of this size with a number of patrons visiting daily is, again, in our opinion, not even a consideration. Number 3, construct a smaller beach facility with restrooms, a concession stand, and first aid lifeguard station. Demolishing the current building and constructing a smaller beach facility is not a fiscally responsible option, as it does not offer the needed amenities of a large covered deck area, a large area of restrooms and with showers, a large concession facility, and a gathering room. This significantly reduces our revenues and our ability to defray our debt service. The 4th consideration was to raise the existing facility onto a pile-supported foundation, remove the existing locker area, and add restrooms and shower facilities. Reconstructing the original facility, with the exception of the lockers, along with these other amenities, was the only option that our Commission felt was right for Fairfield and its residents. We hope you will agree with our recommendation, because otherwise, how will the town recoup this loss of revenue? What will town departments be asked to cut in future budgets if we lose this revenue? I would like to close with this thought. Fairfield is celebrating its 375th anniversary this year, and for 1/3 of our existence, there has been a Penfield Pavilion on this beach. For over 120 years, there's been a pavilion at this exact spot. Penfield Beach has been a focal point of not just our shoreline, but of Connecticut's shoreline. Gathering at Penfield 1 Pavilion has defined the beginning, the middle, and the end of the summer season for Fairfielders for decades. Fairfield is rich with history. Think about it. What would Fairfield be without the Burr Mansion, without our old town hall or the Sun Tavern? We protect our historic sites because they are our identity. Without a pavilion at this site, Penfield 1, Fairfield loses a large part of that identity. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking for Mr. Mayor.
There he is.
There you are.
Right
All right. The third and final part of the presentation is kind of the financial analysis that goes along with this. And I know Mr. Mayor and his team have worked diligently on this. So the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Carney, Ms. Kirsten, Benny Smith, congratulations on your victory last night. There's a document, there's several copies in the back on the table if you haven't grabbed one on your way in.
Do we have it for the board?
Yes.
It's at the back of the packet.
The back of
Yes,
the one that
it
was
was
on the table.
emailed today to the board as well, if you were
Yeah.
at your,
I got it. Yeah, I got it.
if you're at your email locations.
Because of the timing of the email, I'm wondering if the public has been able to access this electronically, and if we might want to, if there are copies.
That's what I said, there's a
There
whole
are, I
bunch in the back.
apologize, I wasn't listening
Yeah,
very well,
yeah,
clearly.
that's all right.
My apologies.
No. All right. The analysis we go over includes information provided by FEMA, the Penfield Building Committee, and the Town Parks and Rec Department. The FEMA calculation is very, very important because the products that are identified, and we'll get into this later, as alternative projects, the reimbursement for those is based upon the FEMA calculation as opposed to the cost of the project itself. The town provided FEMA with engineering damage estimates in July of 2013. FEMA has been very slow in responding, and in a month or so ago, the town sought out the help of Connecticut's congressional delegation to get involved, and FEMA then did produce, and we received on October 23rd, a repair estimate number from FEMA based upon the information that the town had provided them a while ago. The town is continuing, of course, to work with FEMA to realize optimal reimbursement for whatever project is selected. Page 1 of the document is an overview of the current situation. The completion date of the Penfield Pavilion was 2011, the year. The construction cost was $4,600,000. $3,750,000 of that was covered via debt. The total principal and interest of that debt was $4,775,000, and the balance due and payable at September 30th, 2014, $4,189,000. In addition to the debt, the Parks and Rec Trust contributed $250,000. There was a community development block grant of $400,000, and United Illuminating contributed $35,000. Page 2 of the document and page 2A go through the calculations for the cost to the town and the FEMA reimbursement calculation. Page 2 has 3 options, 1A, 1B, and 7A. These option numbers, except for the A's and the B's, are the same option numbers that are in the Penfield Building Committee's presentation. Option 1 is the prepare and protect option, the one that Mr. Bradley was very concerned about and spoke against, but going through the numbers very quickly. The total project cost is $322,000. The insurance recovery, including $3,222,000. Thank you. The insurance recovery, including $1,750,000, and the town's deductible of $500,000 for a total of $2,250,000 would be deducted from that $3,222,000 for a net facility cost for a FEMA calculation of $973,000. The town would then recoup, assuming all the costs were deemed eligible, and we are fairly confident that they would be in all these scenarios, so I don't need to repeat that, would be 75%, a straight 75%. And so the bottom half then of that box shows the project cost again, $3,222,000, less the FEMA reimbursement of $729,000. So the total town cost is $2,492,000. Deduct from that the insurance recovery, which obviously is insurance recovery for that building, so it's appropriate that would be applied to the construction of the replacement or the repair, for a net town funding for the project of $742,000. The option below 1A is 7A. 7A is the one that's on the table today that's been recommended by the Building Committee and is on the agenda for the Board of Selectmen to vote on this evening. This is 13,971 square feet. Mr. Bradley spoke about that. I won't go through what the facility will look like, but it's basically a current facility without lockers to some extent. The cost of that is $4,558,000. Again, deducting the $2,250,000 comes to a net $2,309,000. 75% of that is $1,732,000. And then so the funding would be the town cost is the 4558 minus the 1732, also minus the community development block grant that the town has received for $500,000. That block grant is not in the included in the calculation above, because that block grant is only earned if the building is repaired to FEMA specifications, current FEMA code. So the total project cost then before the insurance recovery application is $2,326,000, and then the net town funding for the project is $576,000. So now I'm going to leave this page, though we haven't gone over 1B yet, because I want to go to this next page and go over, talk about what the alternative, the definition of alternative project, and look at 7B. Basically, when FEMA makes a decision, a determination to reimburse the town, if the building, if the facility that exists at the time of the damage is repaired and mitigated, that is automatically 100% reimbursable. If, however, the footprint is changed or the building is changed in some significant way, then FEMA has the ability to designate the project an alternate project or an improved project. 7A, the one we just went over, is definitely changed a little bit because the locker wing is gone. Okay, so they could make that an improved project, which also gets the 100% reimbursement level at the 75% of the 100% of the costs. However, they could also designate it, since it's a changed project. The reason they would call it an improved project is because it is elevated. So the project has been improved even though it's changed. However, it has changed, therefore, they could designate it an alternate project. Questions?
Difference in cost,
Well, that's where we're going next. But I just want to make sure that the Board of Selectmen, the questions are to the Board, I'm sorry, yes. Was that semi-clear? Okay. So that's why I'm going to 7B right now. So with 7B, as I mentioned earlier, for the alternate project, the FEMA reimbursement is not based upon the project cost. That's why we had to wait for the FEMA number before we could put this specific analysis together. So FEMA's number that was sent to us on October 23rd was $4,188,000. Alternate costs, only 90% of alternate costs are subject to the 75% reimbursement number. So actually, you're only going to receive 67.5%. However, the calculation is not based, as I said, based upon the cost of the project. Calculation is based upon their number. So what you do is you take the $4,188,000, multiply that by 0.9 to get the 90% number, deduct from that the 1.750 insurance reimbursement, deduct from that again the $500,000 deductible portion of the reinsurance, and you get a number of $1,520,000. So then you multiply that $1,520,000 by the 0.75, and you get your contribution if FEMA were to designate this an alternate project. You would get a FEMA contribution of $1,140,000, which is, if you compare the FEMA contribution number that we looked at just a moment ago on page 2, it is $600,000 less than the amount we would get if they designated a improved project. Okay? So, so the net cost of the town then, when you take the 4,558 minus the 1,140, and this would qualify for the community development block grant funds, you get $2,918,000. Deduct from that the $1,750,000 insurance recovery, and you end up with a net town funding for the project amount of $1,162,000. Versus if it is considered an improved project, on page 2, the net cost is $576,000.
Mr. Mayor, question over here.
And I don't know if this is a question for you or for the first selectman. At what point do we know when they will designate that? When would we know which?
That is an excellent question. Very excellent question. We would only know that after we apply.
Okay. Great.
Could you define what apply means? for everybody.
Apply means actually make the decision to do it and then submit to FEMA, you know, this is our preferred choice and this is what we want to do. Would you please price this out? What we've said to FEMA in the past is the more, what's the right word, optimal project. Okay, in other words, to optimize our return from FEMA, we want FEMA to look at what is the highest cost project. So what FEMA currently has, because it makes a difference when they make their calculations, and also in the beginning when we first presented this information to FEMA, the building committee hadn't been formed. You know, there was no discussion about whether it's option A, 1B, 2, whatever. So what we have submitted to FEMA, and which optimizes our potential return, is actually option 1B, which is the current facility raised the 3.5, repaired and raised the 3.5 feet to satisfy FEMA code.
Okay, but to clarify, that's with the locker wing still attached.
With the locker ring still attached, okay, because that would be the highest valued calculation, and it's kind of like when you know that number, it really helps make decisions because FEMA gives us feedback. This is why this is what we approved, this is what we didn't approve, and then you can look at that, and then you can work with them and work with the options, and you can do alternative options at that time. And in fact, you know, if they designate that number, then basically that almost, if anything you do under that number is no longer potentially called an alternative project, but would be a fully approved project. Is that clear?
Somewhat. I
Yeah,
guess,
yeah, I get it.
I think what you said was there was a project or a proposal put in that kind of went to the higher end of things in an effort to get some kind of number from FEMA so that we could then work with it to make educated decisions going forward. However,
And an optimal number, actually, yes.
okay, an optimal number. But the reality is, we won't have a solid figure until we, as town bodies, make a decision, along with the help of the building committee, to move forward on a project, at which point then paperwork will be submitted and we will have back a specific determination then with a specific amount of money at that point. Is that correct?
Mostly correct. The
Okay.
one difference is, I think Kevin has this, the one difference is that we are working with them to get the approval of PW, a project worksheet, from them for the optimal project. So we could get, will get, if we continue that path, we'll get a PW from them with the optimal amount, based upon what they think the optimal amount is, based upon that strategy, that scenario. It's a little complex.
But all of that, everything you said, the optimal amount that we could get is based on raising the building and building to FEMA standards. Is
The
that
current
correct?
building, correct.
Okay.
Which is why we've deviated here in the finance department a little bit away from all the recommendations of the formal recommendations and presentation of the building committee, though this is one of the options they looked at. Is there option 3, if I remember correctly?
That's correct, the whole building gets
Yeah.
lifted and moved back.
Right. Kind of, because you tear some stuff down, and, yeah, but that's beside it, it's a detail we don't dig into. So, back to option 1B.
Yep, Bob,
I have a
I'm sorry,
question.
I'm sorry.
Please.
My apologies.
Oh, thank you for this. So if I can summarize this, and stop me when I'm wrong. If I'm comparing option 7A to option 7B, right?
Same exact project.
Same exact project. The differences are, in one project, we're assuming we're going to be 100% FEMA eligible because they're not going to consider it a material change to the building or whatever the terminology is.
Correct.
And in the other option, we are making an assumption that they are going to ding us on that a little bit and dial it back to 90%.
And cap it.
And cap it, okay? Otherwise, everything else is equivalent. The insurances, the CDBG funds, etc. And the net of that gives me a net cost to the town range on the low end of 576, assuming all these assumptions, and a high end of 1.168 million.
Correct.
That's kind of a...
Exactly correct.
That's exactly correct, okay. And my other question is, thank you for that. My other question is, it looks like consistently across all of these calculations, up on the top section where they are getting you down to a net project cost that they're going to give you some percentage of, they take the gross insurance amount, including the 500K deductible, but down below, obviously, we don't have access to that, so that's why that variance is there?
Well, no, I'm counting that deductible as our $500,000. And that's our money, it's our deductible.
Right.
So that's why I'm only taking, that's why I'm saying, like if you were to include the $500,000 deductible as insurance money, which you could,
Yeah.
then the net cost of the town would only be $76,000.
Correct. We're saying the same things differently.
Yes.
But they're, up top, when they're giving you a percentage of the project cost, they're
They include the,
the whole bit.
right, they assume you're fully insured. That's
And
part of
down
it.
below, we have to net it out.
Right,
So that's it. All right, thanks.
right.
Was that clear?
Yeah, that's absolutely. Back to
Very
the
helpful.
CDBG piece, though, we're certain that we would be able to use those funds.
The CBG piece is eligible of the 6 options presented here for 4 of them. The 2 that it is not eligible for is option 1A and option 8.
I'll rephrase. For those projects for which we would be CDBG eligible, are we certain that we would be able to use those funds, or we would attempt to use those funds, and that would be part of the plan?
We are certain that those are available as long as we adhere to code. That we've earned it hasn't been approved by town bodies yet, so it would have to be approved by town bodies. But the grant says you get $500,000 for rebuilding Penfield, subject to our approval of plans that it is approved, that it is rebuilt up to proper code. But it doesn't matter if it's the full building, or 1/3 the building, or 2/3 the building.
So, in essence, the CDBG funding, use of funding is a statement of intent, essentially, because that process has to go through hearing and approval by, public hearings and approval by town bodies in order to use those funds.
Correct. That is correct. I assumed that it would happen.
Good.
So, back then to page 2. Right-hand side, option 1B. Now, the difference in cost to execute 1B compared to 7A is not exactly $1 million, even though we put $1 million in here, but it is pretty close to $1 million. Now, since this falls under original building repair and/or approve, that additional $1 million in expense would be reimbursed at a 75% level. So you go through the numbers, and the difference between 1B and 7A is $250,000, which is the town portion of the cost of that extra $1 million, in essence. You might just want to look at the numbers there. The calculation, the formula, the format is exactly the same.
Questions?
Okay, then moving on to options 8 and 9. Again, the top portion of 8 and 9 is the exact same as the top portion of 7B, unlike page 2 where the tops are different because it's project cost-driven reimbursement. This is FEMA net facility costs reimbursement driven. So you get the same calculation at the top of the page with the same result of the town would receive $1,140,000 to execute either of these three projects. And then if you look at the bottom line, option 9, which is building a small facility, when we get all done, we get the $1,140,000 from FEMA. We have the $1,750,000 from the insurance, for the insurance proceeds. We have a cost of, and we get the $500,000 from the block grant, and those, the total of those three numbers is $529,000 greater than the cost of the project. So we would now have $529 million, which the town would use to pay down debt related to the original facility.
500.
$29,000. Did I say million? Yes. Ah, well, dream on. And then the same calculation in option A, but obviously demolishing the building is even less expensive, so the town makes more money. And in that situation, the town nets $1,548,000. Mr. Kylie.
Thank you, sir. Back to option 9, we're making the same FEMA assumption, eligibility at 90%. But
That is definitely an alternate project, yes. That is,
well,
that does
that's
not
my
qualify.
question. Is there more than one level of or scale that they put you through? For instance, the 90% sounded like it was a definition of the project being altered. Is there something that's more severe? Because this isn't an alteration. This is an actual demolition and completely new rebuild. Does that fall
Right.
into another category that would be less than 90%?
It's an alternate project.
Okay,
It's
so-
alternate 2.
So it's
Anything
al-
that's alternate 2, 1A is an alternate project.
Okay, so alternate is alternate regardless, and there's no
Right.
increased risk with that money because it's a demolition rebuild versus just
Right.
changing it.
Right, and there's no mitigation dollars in here, it's just,
Okay.
whereas on the other side, on page 1, there's mitigation reimbursement as well.
Thank you.
And now we're going to just look at a ton of numbers, and I apologize. But go to page 3. What we tried to do on this page and the ensuing pages is say, okay, we're going to build this building or not. We're going to have one of these options. And we've said, okay, what is the revenue, the cash flow of the various options? So this is basically, we have two sets of numbers here. Cash flow excluding sunk costs. And the definition of sunk costs is the debt service that we already owe. We built the building, we borrowed the money, we owe that money. So in a way that's really not relevant to the future, but having that information I think is important to see. So we're going to look at the numbers of each option, the revenue, the expenses, the debt service without the sunk costs, and the debt service including the sunk costs. We're going to do that for year 1, and then we're going to look at it for the full 20 years. The revenue and expense numbers were provided by Parks and Rec Operations, and there's actually an attachment, an appendix to this that shows the revenue items, because the revenue items start out a little bit low, they ratchet up over 3 years, and then hold steady for the remaining 16 or 17 years. And the expenses are pretty constant. What we've done then, though, is because time does go by, we have inflated the costs, both the expense and revenue costs, for that 20-year period at 2%. An arbitrary number to some extent, yes? Now, in addition, what we've done, for the options where we have money, where we bring money in, we're showing what the investment return on that money would be invested at 2%. Now, in reality, we would use the money to pay down the Penfield Pavilion debt, but you have to do that based upon the call features, and that'd be very complex to show, but you can like offset it to do a comparison. Okay, so page 3, is, and page 3A, if you put them side by side, you basically have the 6 options.
I can't do that.
It's harder to do when they're copied on a
Oh,
front and back.
yes. No, we did save a half a tree, but yes, we. Yes. All right, so anyway,
We can follow.
you can follow. So, but basically, so page 3 is the original repair and/or improve options. That's 1A, 1B, and 7A, and it shows an option 1A and 1B obviously have the same revenue and the same expense because it's the same facility, the same operational expenses, but it has different debt service because the cost to the town is different. So the cost of the town in 1A, we end up spending, I think, $740,000, and borrowing $740,000. 1B, it's $825,000. So if you look at 1A and 1B, the bottom line surplus, which as the chairman of the Parks and Rec Commission, Brian, indicated, this could be used to pay down the current debt, the sunk cost debt, if you will. And then you look on page 3A, and you have the same numbers, with the exception, I said, for options 8 and 9. I've shown the insurance recovery surplus as a revenue. Well, technically, it's not a revenue for the operation, it's a revenue for the town, and then the interest income. And so you can look at the bottom lines. All of the bottom lines of the original building repair and improve show, excluding sunk costs, show a surplus year-end operations. And obviously, options 8 and 9, since on the first year we're showing the insurance recovery as a revenue item, they show very large numbers as a surplus. The only number that comes in as a negative, it's a small negative, $826, is option 7B, which is the option if the FEMA designated that an alternate option as opposed to an improved option. And then pages 4 and 5 have basically the same pages with one additional line at the bottom, well, actually 2 additional lines at the bottom. The sunk costs, which is a combination of the debt on the original building plus the town has spent since October of 12 to date on all the activity and engineering, et cetera, $400,000. So we owe that. That will be reimbursed. So we will borrow. We would issue $100,000 in debt for the non-reimbursable portion. So that is one line item, and then that's on there is under sunk debt service, sunk cost debt service, and then the other line is the sunk cost debt service for the original bonding of the original facility. And so there you have the numbers, and then it gets kind of fun and exciting when you go to pages 5 and 5A, because it shows, and we could present value these, but the relativities would be the same, and we didn't get time to do that today. It shows the net cash flow positive over the 20-year period. Options 1A, 1B, relatively close to the same, again, because the difference is that limited borrowing difference. 7A, pretty close to the same thing as well, when it's viewed as an improved project. But even if you look at the other projects, there's still, surpluses. So surpluses across the board, ranging from the $4,300,000 down to $1,400,000 over a 20-year period. And that's excluding the sunk costs. Then you go to 6 and 6A, and you throw in the sunk costs, and what this shows you is that the 3 options that are the original building repair and/or improve actually do two things. One, they pay off the new debt, they pay off the current debt, and they each end up with a small net surplus cash flow over the 20-year period. Options, the alternative projects do not. They end up with a deficit. And that's the end.
If I could, just to clarify on page 6.
Excuse me, not a deficit. I apologize. I said that backwards. Let's say back. Total debt. No, I said it correctly. I said it correctly.
Mr. Mayor, on page
Sir.
6, if I could. What you're saying is that when we look at total surplus or deficit for option 1A, option 1B, and option 7A, that's the money left after 20 years.
That is the
But
net.
we have paid off the debt we used to rebuild Penfield in 2011, and any new debt or expenses used to do these modifications.
And the $400,000 that we spent
That's so
between
far.
October and today. 403,000 actually.
And on 6A, that's showing the deficit after 20 years that we end up.
Correct. Because those don't produce the revenue to fully pay off all the old debt. And then you have attached, 3 pages of appendix, which were added because of the, just to show the year 1, year 2, and year 3, and then going forward, years 4 and on are same as year 3 for the revenue line items for options 1, 7, and 9. Mr. Kiley, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think we touched on this, but can you just refresh me on what general assumptions you used in the 20-year models for the increases either in the rental income sides or the expense operational sides?
Everything is 2%.
You use 2% across
2%
on both
across,
sides?
On both sides.
Okay.
And use 2% for investment return on the excess funds for the options.
You
where we
did,
have
okay.
excess funds.
Thank you, yep.
Kristen, did you have a question?
That answers my question.
Yeah, I'm just trying to read fast here.
This is a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. Could I ask another question if I would?
Go ahead.
It might be a combination of you and Mr. Lombardo, but can you just help me understand the variances in the salaries and expenses when you go from, well, let's look at the expense side, from options 1A and B to 7. I see they are going down. It kind of feels right, but I don't understand what assumptions you're using for needing less labor for those particular options.
It's $7,000 a year less due to the lack of the changing rooms and this need for that care and
So
maintenance
that's-
and custodial.
You mean the
et cetera.
locker room?
The locker room where
Yeah.
we have staff to check people in and out.
Okay, so it's the
During
staff.
summer months.
Chair, if you could maybe perhaps speak a little bit closer to the mic so everybody can hear
That's
that.
correct. It would be the seasonal staff for the changing rooms
Okay.
that check users in and out of the facility.
Okay. I'm just trying to catch up quickly on this. Is that the only variance of significance between those two plans? I'm just looking at 1 versus 7 for the moment.
Yeah, and actually,
It
there
looks-
there potentially would be some savings under 7A in electricity or, but I didn't
Yeah, that's,
mess with that.
yeah, that's pretty mushy. Yeah, right.
If I may, I just want, when we're talking salaries and everything, I think everybody should know that there is no full-time employment involved in this facility, whether it's a 4-month facility, seasonal in the summer, or it's a 12-month facility. We do everything with part-time staff down there. my office, my staff inside manages the facility from there also. But we have a director, and summer and winter director on site when needed.
Right.
And that's what.
But you believe that you could live without and budget $7,000 less for part-time staff going from one plan to the other?
Yes, because we did that from history, because of the years that we have been closed, and when we were open. We were open for one summer. So I know what I spent, what I budgeted, versus what we didn't spend when we had the facility closed.
Thank you. Anything else of note when we're scanning through these operational expenses from plan to plan that you want to call out or explain? I mean, obviously, when you go to option 8, they go to zeros, right?
Correct.
And then when you go to option 9, there's even larger variances. They go from, 70,000 to half of that, 35,000. When you go from, it depends where you start. If you start at the 46 or if you start at the 39, but you end up at $17,000. So help me understand a little bit more about that. And I understand it's got to be a little soft because you're trying to project expenses for a smaller facility that we haven't even designed, let alone build or run.
Well,
right?
17,000, okay,
Right.
is on a smaller facility, is just from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and it's the staff to basically clean the facility, pick up the garbage on the beach, as we presently do. So it's 2 staff from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily, 7 days a week. It's 103 days, I believe it is.
Okay. So that would eliminate all the year-round labor associated with having a rental facility there,
That is correct.
and any other labor that's associated with needing to maintain a larger building in general, kind of those 2 big buckets?
Exactly.
Okay, I got it.
Since you raised the issue of assumptions, if you look at the model, and Mr. Mayor, I think you'd mentioned this earlier, that for the first year, that's not worrying about what month it starts, what fiscal year end, that's just based on the next 12 months.
It's a full 4 seasons,
Okay.
a full 12-month period whenever it starts.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter when it's
There's 1 summer,
approved
there's
or when
1
it
winter,
starts.
there's 1 fall, there's 1 spring.
So there's no stub, okay.
Right,
All right.
no stubs.
Do you have a question?
No, I'm not.
Anything else?
No, it's a lot of information to take in at this point, so but I appreciate it being put together, and I think all of this information, really it comes down to that FEMA approval process, and I guess my question isn't necessarily about the numbers themselves, it's about that process, and what you described earlier in terms of putting forward a proposal to try and get the optimal number. When we, if we, as a town, decide to move forward with this project, and then go forward to put in the paperwork with FEMA, are there steps that we can take to help assure that we get the best number possible?
Let's certainly try to guide it, and in talking with the consultants, it's kind of like, maybe it depends upon how, the last time they've talked to FEMA, but we get numbers in the range of 10 to 30% risk. That 7A would become 7B.
So they're saying a 10 to 30% chance that.
Yeah, I think it's closer to the 10, based upon everything I've done. I mean, I've gotten heavily involved with this in the last month,
Thank you.
but there is a risk.
Right, just trying, I think that's a big, this project and, for earlier conversations with the chair of the building committee, I think risk is really the operative word with this project, and whether it's with the numbers, the building itself, the topography, and all of that, so, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, to go to the
I'm good.
public, or do we have more questions? It'll come back to us.
Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would it be okay to ask a question of a previous?
Whoever you want.
Oh,
Everything's on the
okay,
table.
Okay. Hey, Brian, could I ask you just a couple questions, if you will come back up, please? The first thing is I want to thank you very much, and thank you to your commission for putting together that document that you put into our package and the one that you read to us that gave us a good historical understanding of what Penfield is, what it means to our town, and why it's an asset that you guys value and are asking us to protect and preserve and rebuild. So, thank you for that. A couple questions did occur to me, and one of the things you mentioned was handicap access. And we talked about this at great length when we both fixed the facility a few years ago, and as we have, worked on other buildings throughout the years. So, as described to us earlier, the handicap access to this, if you're looking at option 7, okay, the 2/3 option or whatever you want to call it, the handicap access looked to be relatively, it looked increased from what it currently is and to a pretty good level. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I believe it is.
I think that might be...
You want
Maybe.
Mr. Bradley, could you help? We have a question on handicap access on the recommended option.
Yeah,
both
Could-
sides, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going
I guess where I'm going, Mr. Bradley.
Or could we, let's get somebody familiar with the building.
Yeah.
Okay, I think Mr. Bradley would like me to respond to that.
Okay.
Please.
The,
I'm just looking for a general overview of the...
Currently, the building has handicap access to the building via the front entrance, via the parking lot at the west end of the building.
Right.
And there is actually another ramp over closer towards Rickards Beach where the temporary restrooms were this summer. All of those will get you up into the building. We're kind of consolidating some of that, and because the building is shaped differently, we have one that starts at the west parking lot and one that starts at the new east end of the building.
Right.
So as far as entry points, there are fewer, but the building is also not as long as it used to be.
Right.
But again, we can add more. I mean, there's no
Right.
reason that it couldn't be expanded if that was something that was important.
Right, but it looks like there's maybe we do need to add more at some point as we get closer to constructing the building possibly, but it looks like there is a good amount of handicap access. We haven't reduced it significantly or taken any away.
In my opinion, we have not. There, as I said, there are currently 3 points up to the building.
Right.
But I don't think that having 2 for a shorter building is in any way insufficient. I think it's
Right.
proportional. I think
So the
it
building-
satisfies the code.
The building is not any less accessible to handicapped
In my
access.
opinion, it is not.
It
no.
is not, okay. So, which leads me to my second question, since this is, I'm talking about option 7 for the moment, and assuming that that's all true, if we went to an option where we didn't have this building, I think it's option 8, and there was no facility whatsoever, we would lose the high-quality handicap access that we currently have there today or plan to have in option 7, correct? It wouldn't be there.
If there's no building,
There's no, yeah.
it's a blank piece of paper. The site's completely different.
Exactly,
You
so-
would need a way to get people up and over and onto the beach. Now, does that need to be a structured ramp? Does it need to be just a boardwalk on sand with, summer help there to help people on and off if
Right.
needed? That's a good question, and that would be something that would have to be addressed.
So we would have to look at if we went that route. Plus, if we went that route, could you answer, what would that impact be on the overall town? We still have Jennings, right? And there's handicap access at that facility and all, but what's your feel for what that would do to the overall handicap access for the town of Fairfield to its beaches and pavilions? Meaning this
Sure.
facility is not there.
Right.
So there's no handicap access to it. So if you do need handicap access and want to go to the beach,
To the beach itself.
how much more limited are you?
Well, I would assume that we would have to build at least one walkway to the beach, but there would be no decking, no area overlooking the beach that,
That
would
was accessible.
certainly be
And no-
more accessible with the building there,
And no shade.
and no shade, correct.
Right.
So I don't know the answer to what the impact would be to, access the sand. But clearly, we would need something constructed there to get up and over to the beach area.
All right, thank you very much for that. And the other question I had is, if we go, and this is another question you may not have a direct answer to, but if we did not have Penfield Pavilion, and this might be for Jerry, what type of impact do you think that might have on what people who live in town view as the value they receive for their beach stickers, right? Each year you pay X number of dollars for your beach sticker, and you have access to all of our beaches and our pavilions. So what type of global impact do you think having no pavilion might have or could have to residents who are purchasing and using beach stickers?
Well, at this facility, I think we'd see less usage. Okay. If it was a smaller facility, not everybody uses the beach.
Right.
Okay, in town. Not everybody uses the gathering room either, but those that do attend the event, you may have a function there that you invite people that have never been to the beach down there. They may go to Jennings or Zasco or Southport. It's very hard to quantify what you're asking.
Absolutely, I know that.
But there would be an impact.
Yeah.
How great, that's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah. I mean, anecdotally, it has to be on the downside, right?
Oh, it'd definitely be limited. I mean,
Yeah.
just with the facility, as the facility being down now, okay, with no permanent concession, portable trailer restrooms,
Right.
which are, I've had more than one complaint.
Sure.
Our attendance, okay, with a lifeguard station, not on the beach, it's over in the sailboat
Right.
area. Our attendance of that facility diminished, okay, and it reflects in the income of the parking that we bring in, the daily parking funds. For instance, we used to bring in approximately $80,000 a year when the facility was up and running, brand new, just in daily parking. Then when we closed, it went to 60. And this past year, we're estimating about $40,000
Okay. Right.
in parking revenue.
Okay, so there are some data points that point in that direction?
Yes.
Okay, and that was my point. Thank you, guys.
Any other questions from the board at the moment? Any part of it? Okay to go to the public? They've been waiting for a while.
Sure.
All right. Is there anybody from the public that would like to comment? If you just come up to the podium and state your name and address. And just a reminder, this is public comment as opposed to public questioning, but we'll guide you.
I have a written statement. I'm not a good public speaker, so I'll give it to you in writing. I have 9 questions, basically, that I think you should consider as a board. First, I'd like to ask a couple questions. Can we get a copy of this FEMA letter from October 23rd, which gives some data on FEMA's...
Are those questions in here?
No.
All right. If you'll ask those questions, we'll record those in the minutes.
Okay. Second...
Excuse me, Jan, could you give us your name and
Oh,
address?
I'm very sorry. Jan Reber, 85 Belmont Street. Second, which is not in here, why is there no alternative in all these numbers, all these options, that doesn't show the FEMA grant? The FEMA grant is certainly not assured. So we have all these options. Every option where FEMA is applicable, the numbers show it. I'd like to see numbers that look, what would happen if we don't get that FEMA money? You can only get them by backing out from what you've been given. I think that's inappropriate. Okay. Can I ask my 9 questions? Am I allowed to do that in my statement? I'll just do it very quickly. Number 1, does option 7 offer adequate flood control? Your flood and erosion control board does not support option 7. They don't feel it's adequate. I don't understand why you don't get to some kind of reconciliation with your flood control board. Flooding is very important down there. What does that mean?
Just giving you time to talk, but it's not unlimited.
Okay. Number 2, Has the Penfield Building Committee offered assurance that the cost estimates are firm and are the best value to the town? I think numerous things have been left out of their estimate. The mechanicals have not been inspected. Any problem with the mechanicals will add a great deal to the cost. The Parks and Recreation Committee has not given them any data on how the banquet hall, as I call it, would be used in terms of pre-wiring it for entertainment, any other uses like that would cost money up front. None of that's been taken into consideration. Has the committee provided you with all the information you need about the causes of Penfield Pavilion damage? Do you really understand, not the natural event that occurred, but why? And are we pursuing to see if the architect from the first building created any errors and omissions that we could recover against his insurance? Fifth, is Fairfield in the large-scale banquet hall business? No other town in southern Connecticut is. Westport rents their facilities privately. I don't understand why other towns know something that Fairfield doesn't. Number 6, what are the implications for the beach area if the banquet business is greatly expanded, which the revenue projections imply? Does that mean more late-night noise on weekdays, other inconveniences from expanded use, traffic, etc.? None of that's been discussed. Where does a new banquet hall at any cost fit into Fairfield's budget priorities? Is this more important than anything else in Fairfield to be done, that we could use this money for other purposes? The insurance money doesn't have to be used for Penfield. It can be used for anything. Have you considered the funding implications for option 7 on Fairfield's debt? Our debt is already 9% of our town's budget, $26 million a year in debt service, one of the highest in Connecticut. Have you given the public all the information it needs to assess option 7? We didn't have the numbers until tonight, and we still don't. Not only didn't we have the numbers till tonight, neither did the building committee or the recreation committee. How are you going to allow us to give intelligent comment with giving us the numbers at the last minute? I don't understand. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public would like to comment?
Talk about the money?
No, you can comment on any aspect of the presentation tonight.
Oh, okay.
Would you like to do that? Again, if you just state your name and give us your address, please.
Terry Keppel, 54 Woodcrest Road. I have a comment and question on the revenue projections that are presented in Appendix A. I guess I'll ask the
Excuse me, if you can comment to the board first, we'll decide what happens after that, if you would.
I have a question. What were the actual revenue from 2011 from Penfield 1 that were presented in the budget? And here it's $75,000 for the rental.
All right, this is public comment, it's a question, but we will record your question and get an answer back.
Okay. I have a question on the revenue projections. What is the basis that the revenue is going to increase double from year 1 to year 2?
Okay, we'll record that and get back.
So I don't get any answers tonight before you vote?
You're not, in this section, it's public comment. We'll take it up after, if you would.
Is there a separate section for questions?
All right, you can record your questions now. This is public comment. That is...
Okay, my comment is, you're doubling the revenue from year 1 to year 2. That does not seem realistic. That means if the average rent is $1,000, you're renting it out 147 times a year, which is every single Friday, Saturday, and Sunday throughout the year plus. Sorry I didn't bring a copy of the budget with me, but I think you have the revenue for year 1 at $162,000. I think the revenue from 2011 was approximately $50,000. That's my comment. The revenues are totally unrealistic. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
My name is Jane Talamini, Talamini. I live at 1125 Old Field Road. Now, I'm not saying anything about finances, so I'm not following up what was just said. This is out in the ether. First of all, this is no secret. I am totally opposed to everything that has been presented this afternoon, and not without tremendous appreciation and thanks to the committee that spent one of the nicest summers we have ever had meeting. And I've been to 2 of those meetings, and that was all I could take. I mean, they're really bad, not because of Mr. Bradley, he did a wonderful job, but just honestly, tedium. But they came up with something, and you heard it tonight. I read the committee charge. I was horrified. Who wrote it? Couldn't find out. But the thing is, it presented the committee with a narrow path. You have got to rebuild and figure out a way to rebuild. Well, what about not rebuilding? There are other options than putting something up there. And I think if it's been knocked down to the extent it was twice, that maybe you do some thinking about not putting something there. People say we need a pavilion. Well, we don't need a pavilion. We have the Jackie Durrell Pavilion. People say, but we need something grand. Well, how pretentious can you be, really? Let's get real here. You don't need anything grand. There are beautiful, beautiful beaches in this country, and maybe you haven't been fortunate enough to see them. I've been lucky enough to go to Nantucket. I've gone to Martha's Vineyard. I've seen Squidnocket Beach. I've seen Lucy Vincent Beach. They are perfectly magnificent, and guess why? Because they have their own rocks. They have their own sand. They have their own dunes. They do not have a structure, because nobody wants a structure. They want the beaches beautiful, not sullied with. So keep that in mind, and if you're lucky, go travel and see some of these places. I've also lived in California. Talk about beaches, my goodness. We could never have anything like that, but that's all right. What we have is awfully, awfully nice, and I don't know why we want to trash it. Now, the charge says that the Penfield Building Committee would be guided, among other things, by comments from the public. Really? I spoke at a meeting held last year at one of the 2 schools that have the same name in town. I'm a good writer. In fact, I've been told I'm a gifted writer. My remarks were lasting, cogent, well-crafted, and the audience appreciated them. Yet coverage in local papers was nil. They never referred to me or quoted me. Why not? Well, I finally figured it out. I wasn't supporting the charge, and that was all that counted. Is the press here this afternoon?
Yes.
Well, maybe we could speak at the end.
Well, I'd also point out that it's captured on Fair TV also, so that goes out to the entire town in addition.
Oh, okay. Now, there are several alternatives to the rebuild proposal the committee has presented. They are responsible responses to the crisis we face in the face of the indominant force we call Mother Nature. Rebuilding is not among them. Everything I read or heard after the onslaught of Sandy, particularly with regard to the shoreline, said, do not do the same thing again. Do not do the same thing again. Do not do... Oh. And yet here we are given this proposal by, one would think, intelligent people to do the same thing again. Where have they been? Do they read? I guess not. Do they listen? I guess not. Did they look around and see? Maybe so, but wearing blinders like horses. I mentioned the do not stricture to Chairman
Ms.
Bradley,
Talamini?
who
Ms.
assured
Talamini,
me.
I would ask that you keep your comments factual.
If I do what?
Keep your comments factual, and please do not make personal attacks on the people that have been involved in this.
Did I attack someone?
They could be interpreted that way.
Well, okay. Anyway, I talked to Chairman Bradley and mentioned the stricture about do not do again. And he said the committee was not recommending to do the same thing again, Part of the construction will be deeper, stronger, bigger. Well, I obviously did not make my point. I request that before you do anything about this proposal, that you have another charge, and this is to the citizens of Fairfield who meet to study the key environmental issues as they apply to the shoreline. There are a lot of these. And then report to you. Now, such people exist in droves. I've talked to them. And I don't understand, and I don't really appreciate the fact that the charge that was drawn up completely eliminated this aspect of this beach and what should be done with it. I mean, there's a blank there, there's a disconnect that in this day and age doesn't make sense. Now, everywhere you look, you will read about climate change. You don't have to roll your eyes, we all know everybody does that. But it's very, very real. And it's very real when it pertains to beaches. This is today's New York Times. Now, you may not have gotten to it yet. Op-ed page. Read the article on sand. A whole article on sand. I think we have a beach, we have sand. One of the remarks is, today, 75 to 90% of the world's natural sand beaches are disappearing, due partly to rising sea levels and increased storm action, but also to massive erosion caused by the human development of shores. So there you have it. You read this thing all the time, this kind of thing, and how you can read it and then go off into la-la land and talk about palatial buildings on Penfield, I simply do not understand. I think it's highly irresponsible. And I'd like you to think about it very, very seriously. Thank you.
Any other public comment? It's not a requirement, but you're welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, boy.
Thank you, Jane. My name is Gaylord Meyer, and I RTM District 1. I'm here this evening to represent my constituents, as well as share my own opinion. I kind of in the same boat with Jane. I concur. I've had the opportunity to travel up and down the East Coast, and there's some absolutely magnificent beaches, and even including downtown Southport. Our beach is there. They have a restroom, they have a bodega for food, they have beautiful beaches and a lifeguard stand, and everybody's happy. I think that in the financial end of this, on our budget and the latest overruns that we have with some of our building facilities, we need to really consider where we're going to put our money. But I got probably over 300 emails. But what was interesting was I didn't get them all from District 1. I got them from 10, 5, 8, and 6. And I'm not going to read them all, but these are from 9, 6, and 5, and they're very short. And maybe you also got them. And this is from William in District 6. Tear it down and walk away. You won't win any votes by throwing good money after bad. Cut your losses and walk away. I'll make sure you get copies of all of these. There's Maria from District 5. I am one of the countless lifelong Fairfield residents. Please hear our voice. We do not need an extravagant catering facility. We should not spend money we don't have. Fairfield residents are happy with something similar to what Westport enjoys, Campo Beach, a concession stand, clean restrooms, with some lighting for maybe both day and night. That's from Maria, District 5. And then there's David from District 9. And he says, given the significant expenses facing the town in the current budget, current, future, and pensions, the future essential of capital expenses, the spending millions on a pavilion is not appropriate. In addition, as detailed as many recent and very large-scale studies, rising sea levels and, on average, stronger than more severe coastal storms will threaten and access the structure, reducing its usefulness to town residents. It makes more sense for our town and our taxpayers. Let private actor assume the risk. Well, that was kind of nice from David. But as I said, I had probably 100 from District 1, and the rest all came from other districts. I think that we need to provide, and if you can go to Milford, and you will see a magnificent beach. I think it's Silver Beach. It's 2.5 miles long with a boardwalk. It has access for the handicap, and there are shade trees where people can sit and enjoy the beach. There are bodega trucks where you can go and get food. They go because it's beautiful. You don't have to provide a pavilion that looks like a monstrosity to this town. That's not what it's about. We have other priorities that we need to take care of. And I personally am against this, and most of my residents of District 1 and 9, 5, and 6 are also. Thank you for your time, and also thank you for Mr. Bradley and his committee. You did a wonderful job under the circumstances, but I think the people need to be heard on this. And I did get one, and I think he was from District 9, and one from 1, excuse me, who said that they'd like to rebuild. But I think the majority of the people don't want to spend this money. Thank you.
Any other public comment? All right, it's back to the board at this time. Any further comment or discussion from here? All right, let me offer one. We've got a lot of information here. We've got a lot of numbers here at the last minute with several different options, and I think there's some questions raised that it might be good to get the answers for, so we can get those answers back to the public before making a decision. And I know it's taken a while to get here, but I'm wondering whether we want to vote tonight or postpone this till our next meeting to give us time to get back to both the public on some of these questions, but also to take time to look at these numbers. Any thoughts?
Quick one on the revenue. Maybe the guys can speak to the revenue assumptions. Jerry, the revenue year one, year two escalation. Can you guide us through your thought process on that, please?
Assumptions were made, basically
14 months that we were open, the data and the monies that we brought in. We based our season on a 12-month season. If you look in the, as was mentioned, if you look in the fiscal year budget book, it would be different because we were only open our first year from August. We opened in August and we ended in July, and we didn't have a big startup. We did bring in $100,000 with those 50 rentals, or 100 rentals, excuse me. We rent the facility a year in advance. So we took the projections, and I'm just trying to find them here because I know I have them. Paperwork. Here they are. Right. I'm sorry for this, but I do have it. Just not sure where I put it. On the projections, and I have a 10-year, and I'll give you this data, of the number of rentals for the seasons. When we went to a 12-month facility in 11, when we opened up in August of 11, that year we did 100 rentals.
We also were taking reservations and bookings for the following year, and at that time, we did 121 rentals. However, we closed in October of 12 due to Storm Sandy. At that time, of the 121 rentals, we had 45 rentals from July in the fiscal year, July to August. Or, excuse me, July to October. We refunded 76 of those rentals because the facility was no longer usable. However, we were getting a lot of inquiries, and we were going to add, on the low side, of 30 to 40 new rentals. So I based my projections on 160 rentals moving forward as we ramp up the facility. We were also renting for the following year of 13, the full year of 13. And at that time, we were estimating approximately 190 rentals.
Can I stop you right there?
Yes.
Let's call it 160 to make the math simple. That's 3 a week, right? How much is a rental?
We based it on an average of $925. They fluctuate. We have different rates for different times of the year, different times of the day. But out of the first full year of operation, or full, our income was based on $925 per rental.
Okay. Do you expect to increase that, or is that the number going forward?
For the first 3 years, I did not increase the rental rate.
Okay.
And we did that. My assumption is we have to get the facility moving along.
All right. So,
Now-
just in rough numbers, if you do 3 a week at roughly $1,000 a pop, that's about $150,000.
Correct.
Okay. I'm just trying to get the big picture math. Okay. Is 3 a week a reasonable number?
Yes.
It is.
As I said,
On
we
a
were...
year-round average.
On a year-round average.
Average.
Okay.
Okay.
In the facility, on a 12-month facility, because we rent it in the afternoon and evening, other than July and August,
Mm-hmm.
okay, when the beach season is in full force. There's really availability of 668 rentals.
How do you get to that?
Going through, if you have weekday rentals, weekends, you have twice a day. At 100% capacity, you could have that many rentals. I don't ever foresee that happening. We'd like it, but we'd never see it because of the revenue stream that would bring in. However, we figured it on on a 28% booking rate, okay, in the third or fourth year, that which is approximately 190 rentals. And these are all projections that, from our data that we had, firm data, as well as projections of the number of rentals that we would have had Storm Sandy had not hit. As I said, when it was a seasonal rental, and we ranged from, Memorial Day to Labor Day, that's when about the second weekend of September, because there's no heat, there's no fireplace in the old facility prior to us renovating it into the facility that we have. We were ranging between 46 rentals, basically 59 was the high number of rentals in Penfield 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? When we opened up 12 months, we rented it 100 times, our very first year. Okay? As I move forward on the 75,000, we're estimating that it'll be less number of rentals the first year because
Yeah, you got to wrap it up.
we got to ramp it up.
Sure.
We weren't closed for 2 years.
Right.
Okay, we did it, we started construction in September.
Mm-hmm.
We opened up in August. Okay?
Right.
And we knew the time frame.
Okay.
So we feel fairly comfortable with our numbers. I mean, a lot of it is some assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
They are the numbers that we submitted and we were reimbursed. Our insurance company thought they were feasible and reachable on the third year and moving forward. So that's how we came up with those numbers on the rentals.
Okay, now quickly, if I may, please? Thanks. How large, what is the square footage of the banquet facility or the room you rent? What is that?
I don't know off the
Roughly?
top of my head.
Well, how many
Joe,
people,
do you know?
how many people does it?
We rent it, it's comfortable for inside only.
Yeah.
Depending on what type of function, anywhere between 175, I believe it is.
Okay. So roughly 150, 200 people?
Yes.
On a busy night?
Yes.
What is the market for a nice new, price-wise? We're at $925. I'm just talking price point. If you weren't going to Padfield and you were looking to put a party together or whatever, and you wanted a nice new beach facility that could hold 150 people, what would a consumer expect to pay for that type of rental in a private environment?
I don't have that.
Is
with
there
me.
even one?
I don't believe there's, the nearest one would be Longshore, and you can't rent that one
Yeah.
via, just rent the hall. We're not in the catering business. We rent the facility. We use
Understood.
the facility for different activities.
Right.
But there really isn't one that you could compare apples to apples. If you want to use, if you're having a function at Longshore, you're paying for
Yeah.
all your amenities with it, food.
Right.
They're doing everything for you at a fixed price.
Right. So there's no real comp, is what you're saying? No.
And I think that's what, one thing, depending on, I think that's what, when we vetted this back in 2008,
7, 8, yeah.
7, 8,
Yep.
a lot of these questions, same questions came up.
Sure.
And it was reasoned that this is the type, this facility is there, we've had it, it needs to be, it's used by the community, okay? We went from a seasonal to a year-round,
Right.
and that was one of the bigger reasons why the facility was built as a banquet hall, because of the projected revenue stream that it would bring back to the community to help offset the building cost.
Right.
At that time, when we built the facility, and even today, we believe that, people have questioned, how is it, you have Jackie Durrell facility, you're going to lose revenue. We had projected back then, and we hold true, and our numbers for the first year were fairly accurate. We'd lose about 20 rentals a year over at Jackie Durrell.
Right.
Our first year of operation, we lost 9, I believe it was. Okay? There isn't a lot of there's not a lot of, I'm using the data that I have.
Right.
And some assumptions moving forward. As I told my staff when we were working on this, my crystal ball broke, so I was having some issues.
Mine too.
But,
So just kind of in summary, I'm hearing that you're relatively comfortable that you can rent this place 3-4 times a week. On the, that's that 140 to 190 range over 2 or 3 years, and you can ramp it up to that.
Right.
And I'm also hearing that without a perfect comp, you're confident that the $1,000 per rental is a reasonable fee range to be in. And you're not too low or too high where you're going to drive business one way or the other.
I'm sorry I didn't bring those numbers with me, because I did do like what we get for Borough Homestead, what they get for the
Yeah.
Scandinavian Club, what you get for the Irish Club here in town. Also what we did at Longshore. I don't have those numbers with me. I know I have them at the office. We started low over the course of the years. Once you build up and you build, you get it out there. Yes, our rates could go up because you're on the beach. You're on a setting that you don't get at any other rental hall, okay, in this area. Now, again, we don't provide anything other than that, the hall and the view, the setting. But yes, our rates could go up, but you don't want to jump, you don't want to start here and not get the clientele and get the numbers. We also never really got into a marketing campaign of this facility. We were just beginning to do that. Matter of fact, our first year, we had put $30,000 in our operating budget for our marketing, and we were working with, bridal shows and things of that nature to bring that in. We did have day meetings, so we were trying to get the business clientele in there during the day when it is the off hours, basically, for a big party.
And that's the type of clientele and the type of functions that we were trying to get.
Okay.
But it's used by, you know, if you're going to have a large function at home or a picnic and family groups, that's how these facilities are being used. And not everybody can afford going and paying the caterer and everything else. That they do their own cooking, or they bring in the bodega trucks or the pizza truck and they have it out in the yard, out in the driveway. That's why we don't have a big kitchen for cooking in there. We have a warming facility.
I got it. Okay.
So that's how we use the facility.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Any comments? Any
Yes.
further discussion?
Yes, other questions? This was a question for Mr. Bradley, if I may?
Yep.
Through the chair. And I guess as he's coming up, I want to recognize that it is late and this has been a long meeting. But I am actually not in favor of postponing this item. I would actually like to vote on it tonight. I certainly am interested in conversation among board members, but I do have a few other questions just as follow-up. Mr. Bradley, thank you for coming back up. The contingency funds, we talked about that the last time you were here, and that came up in the public comment. And I just wondered if you could comment about that. When you did the presentation tonight, you showed us one of the pictures and you talked about the electrical wiring and the tension on that wiring. Do the contingency funds include money for any potential troubles with the mechanicals or with some of those things? And what kind of unforeseen circumstances? So I guess these are two questions. What kind of unforeseen circumstances have you considered when coming up with this budget?
Well, Shulman is not here, but the estimator who has been consistently on this project has made an assumption regarding the percentage of, let's say, electrical, mechanical, and HVAC that could be damaged. And I think it's 25% of the cost of new. Somewhere along the line, we had to make some decisions regarding what the extent of damage might be. There's a contingency for option 7, which includes 5% for design and 10% for construction, or 15% contingency. I think it's over $400,000. Now, that would be used for those unforeseen conditions. But somehow you have to make some assumptions, and we've made the best assumptions we can after talking with everybody on the team. But we are carrying a contingency. We also asked the forensic engineer, the engineer that investigated the damage, to come back last week and go through the building again, because it's been sitting there. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't all of a sudden go through all this, walk back in the building, and have more problems, because it will degrade over a period of time. We've talked about that in this room. So he's come back, he had a couple of small comments about some settlement of 1/4 of an inch, but basically the building is the way he looked at it a year and a half ago. So contingency, I mean, you could keep on stacking contingency, but sooner or later you just have to say, this is the best we can do. And right now, it's 15% on option 7. And at design development drawings, you would have 7.5% probably, 10% max, because it's considered that by the time an estimator looks at DD, design development drawings, he's got enough information to do a material takeoff and do some hard estimating. Shawmut also has talked to different vendors, specifically moving, excavating, pile driving, and so forth, and brought them on site to get a kind of a feel for their numbers.
Great, thank you. That was a very helpful answer. I appreciate it. My other question is actually for Mr. Michelangelo. So Thank you for being here. My question is about the flood mitigation process and planning, since that has come up over and over again, and certainly Mr. Bradley, if you, now that you did sit down, I will ask Mr. Michelangelo, but if there are pieces of this that you want to chime in. In the beginning of the process, there was some conversation publicly between the Flood and Erosion Control Board and the Building Committee, and I understand that the Building Committee had the Flood and Erosion Control Board there, and that there have been various opinions expressed. What I would like to know from you is, from the Department of Public Works standpoint, what kind of planning are we doing for shoreline flood protection and mitigation overall, and how does this project fit or not fit into that planning that you are working on with the department?
Sure. Now, the plans do call for, the current plans, under any scenario, call for an elevation of 12, carried around from Rickards Beach through the building, in front of the building, and connected to Jackie Durrell. So in our discussions, at even below elevation 12, there'll be the scenario where there may be flooding in the beach area, but the flooding will come from other areas before it would cross the Penfield Pavilion property itself. I work closely with the Flood and Erosion Board. I respect their opinions on almost all matters. And one of their, and not speaking for them, but one of their philosophies behind this is that, if we have to protect Fairfield in total, this will be one piece of the puzzle that's behind us. And one of the things that we'll vet in the future is, even though that's not a bad logic to follow, one of the things that we haven't come to a consensus with as a community is, what will our flood and erosion plan be to protect the beach area? So yeah, that is something that I am working with the Flood and Erosion Board. As far as a timetable, we hope to, at our November meeting, flush out our plan further and hopefully present it to the Board of Selectmen at one of your December meetings, as far as the Flood and Erosion Board recommendation for entire Fairfield on a concept level for the beach area, and not specifically for the pavilion itself.
And if I might chime in here, one of the things that I asked Mr. Michelangelo to do, and also the chair of the Flood Control Board, was to sit down together and come up with a comprehensive plan. We've got pieces in place, and there's certainly some updating. It's not like we didn't have any plan at all. But I asked him to go through and do that, just to your point. So we're not doing this on a one-off basis. It's what's the vision, what's the plan, what do we have to take place and do this? I know Joe's moved on a number of initiatives, been working with the Flood and Erosion Control Board, but I thought it best to bring back a picture or vision for our town, and specifically our beach area, before the Board of Selectmen, so we can all see that and see the big picture.
So I guess then more specifically, is if we were to move forward with the option that's proposed today via the funding, would that impede or in any way inhibit any of, as far as you know at this point in time, the flood mitigation or protection plans that might be implemented in the future?
No, I don't believe this will conflict with those in any way. And I do believe the plan does adequately protect against localized flooding. Once again, if we get a Sandy, that won't protect it, and we're not protected against the future Sandy currently, but it will prevent the localized flooding through the property to that elevation 12.
Thank you.
Kevin?
If I may. Mr. Mayor, could you please quickly walk us through the bonding resolution? If there's anything unique or you want to call out. I think I'm looking at the latest version of it. Anything that we need to take specific or unique note of?
You have the latest version if you have the one that is for, I have it in front of me.
I just want to make sure I got the right one.
You have the one for $4,558,399.
Yeah, that's the one I have, okay.
That's the one, yeah. It is very specific because of the multiple number of options that were bantied about, so to speak, or
Right.
discussed. It is written more specifically than your normal resolution with respect to, it definitely defines option 7. Other than that, it's standard, the money has to be spent on this project, can't be transferred between other projects, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. And it references the 1.75 million net, and it nets it out?
Yes, and that's that out.
It does net that out.
'Cause that money is in-house.
Okay. And this, and the numbers, okay. And it refers back to 7, whether it's 7A or 7B, it's the same thing?
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions?
No, I'm good.
You ready to take a vote tonight?
I am.
You said so? All right, may I have, to get us in the proper sequence here, may I have a, let's see, the resolution was to hear, consider, and adopt a bond resolution appropriating funds for the repair of Penfield Pavilion and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation, a copy of which is hereto attached. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
A second.
Now, any further discussion?
Sure. I'll go first. You know, this has been a very long process, a very difficult and challenging process, with a lot of competing interest, ideas, considerations, thoughts, and plans. Far from simple, far from easy, and, you know, very complex. For me, it boils down to a couple salient points. The town asset. Is the town asset worth preserving, maintaining, having going forward in some form? And my answer to that question is yes. I do believe that the asset that we have, that we call Penfield Pavilion, some people like it more than others, is an asset worth preserving, maintaining, and moving forward with for the next generation. That's where I stand on that. The committee has done just a phenomenal job. They were tasked with a next to impossible job. If you look at, I think it was slide 14 that Mr. Bradley put up on the overhead that showed 2 columns worth of issues that they had to deal with, and there were more than that. But it helped in one slide point out, you know, what the issues were, what the challenges were, and what they had to deal with over, you know, the better part of a year. They did a phenomenal job. They were fair, they were reasonable, they were thorough, and I came away highly confident in the work that they did as being the right recommendation for the town of Fairfield. I do want to thank the administration for getting us to this point. I want to thank the finance department as well for getting us up to speed with the information that we were presented with today. It helps bring clarity to me. I'm a finance person. It helps bring clarity to me to be able to see the numbers together in a concise form that helps support the picture. You can challenge the assumptions on revenue. We had some good questions on revenue, rentals, pricing, things of that nature. You know, there's an art and there's a science to budgeting. The one thing you know about any budget is that it's going to be wrong, right? It's going to be either high or low by a couple bucks. But I think directionally they did a good job, and I didn't notice anything in their commentary that, you know, made me think that their expectations were not within reach. And the final piece for me that drove it home was, you know, I'm looking at this as an investment, and any investment I believe needs to be looked at long-term. So as I was going through Mr. Mayor's presentation, and please stop me if I have anything wrong along the way, but when I look at the 20-year numbers, with all the sunk-in cost included, which I think you have to consider, you can't not consider them We owe the money, we have to pay the money, and we need to find a way to make both pieces work together moving forward. So when I look through pages 6A and 6B, I believe those are, no, 6 and 6A, excuse me, you know, option 1 and 1A and 1B, you know, I have been convinced through the engineering recommendations and studies, and based on the presentations that we received from the committee and the safety factors, that that's just a plan that we don't want to do. The risk is too high. The return is not any greater than any of the other plans. It's not the project that I would recommend going forward with. When I look at option 8, you know, I just don't like the pile of sand. I think we have an asset that we need to preserve, protect, and move forward with. So I'm not in favor of doing nothing. That leaves me with 8 and 9. And when I look at 8, or no, that leaves me with 7 and 9, excuse me. And you know, there's some variances on project 7, but when you look at the 20-year return on 7 versus 9, on project 7, the ranges go from, you know, a negative $279,000 to a positive to a negative $400,000. And when you compare that to the only other project that's on the table, in my opinion, with 1 and 8 being gone because 1 is unsafe or not the right project and 8 gives me nothing, the return on option 9 is $2.1 million, negative $2.1 million. So I'm actually ahead on 7 in either case than I am 9, with all the assumptions that I've been told being true. And I have to make an assumption myself that they're true or they're close to true or close enough that the long-term investment on one of the 7s is better than the 9. And so that was the final piece of convincing for me to see the long-term financial analysis that Mr. Mayor presented. So I am in support of option 7. I'm in support of moving forward with this resolution tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to thank Selectman Kiley as well for those comments. I would like to see movement taken on this project. I do have concern about the building, as Mr. Bradley said. If we would like to preserve this asset, we are going to need to take action to do so, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to vote tonight. I just want to address as well the issues around the environment and flood and erosion control. I very much appreciate the comments from our Director of Public Works and the concern about the environment that we've had from many people, not just our Flood and Erosion Control Board, many of you in this room and myself as well. And I trust and believe that the Building Committee will continue to work with our DPW, with that board, and that our DPW will continue to work, as the First Selectman said, with all plans that will best protect us going forward. But we know that there's risk. As I said earlier, the risk, whether it's Mother Nature or with the finances, either way, there's risk in this project. I heard in the comments that rebuilding isn't among them. We've had many residents who have rebuilt. You know, there is risk along the shoreline, and I'm certainly not rolling my eyes about climate change. It's a real issue. But we have, as a building committee, and I would like to echo those comments, you truly have done a phenomenal job in such a professional and thorough way, but have addressed that with the change in the way that the building is going to be built and the use of the pilings, which is something that, as Mr. Bradley pointed out, is technology that's been around for many years. But even then, we are taking a risk. I acknowledge that. I did also want to address the fact that when we appointed the committee, we also, if you recall, had them come stand in front of us here in the room. And we said to the group that no matter what you do, you will be making many people unhappy. And I think that this is a difficult position that all of us are in. And certainly as a Board of Selectmen, we do take responsibility. This is our charge. We wrote the charge. we take that responsibility. It's our responsibility to decide whether this project moves forward from a funding standpoint. But there's a broad diversity of opinion. I received also many emails. I also happen to have been out knocking on doors for the better part of the summer and talked to thousands of people, and there's a broad diversity of opinion about this pavilion within our community. There are many who do want to see a beach, just the sand, and there are many who would like to see the asset protected, who would like to see a pavilion, a community gathering space. You know, a banquet hall is one term, but it's also a community gathering space. I very much appreciate and respect the concerns of the residents and neighbors, and I think that we absolutely must, going forward, and I've heard Mr. Lombardo address this, appreciate what the neighbors go through and respect that and do everything that we can to make sure that if we build a facility there, that we are responsible and respectful of the neighbors who are there. But it's my opinion that many years ago, or a number of years back, when, you know, I see former members of the RTM at that time in the audience today who had the debate about what we were going to do. We made a decision. We had 2 terrible storms, and I would like to continue to support the decision that was made by those bodies, and will do so again today as a Board of Selectmen member, to make the changes that have been proposed by the building committee and to move this project forward. So I will be voting in support.
All right, thank you. Thank you. And some final comments from myself. One, you know, in watching a number of building committees go on, they're not all in the cauldron that this one has been through. And certainly divergent points of view from the community, but also within the building committee. Our intent when picking this building committee was not to find 11 people that would all vote the same. It was find 11 people that represented different parts of our community. And there were some very good debates among the community, some of which boiled over into other committees and presentations as we went through. But I think that's healthy, and I think it was better to have those discussions than it was to suppress those discussions or pretend they didn't exist. There are many different perspectives. This is a town of 60,000 people that do not all view things the same way. I do want to thank, in addition, our finance department and Bob Mayer for his leadership on this. There is nothing easy about FEMA. There's no idiot's guide to FEMA rules and regs, as we found both with our neighbors going through it in the beach area, but also on this project. We're working with a FEMA consultant who's been working with us on a number of projects to make sure that we got every dollar back we could when we were looking at things like floodgates and bridge repairs and some of the things we went through earlier, also helping us through this. But the amazing number of different categories that pop up, and I'm sitting here trying to figure out who in the world came up with all these different rules. We're trying to rebuild something that was knocked down by Sandy. Give us a rule. Just, make it easy. Don't make it hard. And this is very hard. As you can see, if it fits in this bucket, you get one way, and there's 90% of this number and 75% of that number. Why in the world is it that hard? It shouldn't be done and we're one town. We do this once in a while. There are other towns that go through this once in a while. The professionals down in D.C. that wrote these rules deal with this every day, year in, year out, every time there's a storm. Why are we the guys that have to go to school to learn how to deal with this? So I would hope someday, somehow, that would all be made much easier. I want to thank Jerry and Parks and Rec, and I know Mr. Lombardo sat through many of these meetings to make sure that the Parks and Rec perspective and mission and program component was included in the discussions. This is definitely a valuable amenity and resource to our community. I know that my parents, when my mom was alive and when my dad could, they would get down there because, as they pointed out to me, it was one of the few places they could spend at the beach and be in the shade. All right. One of the few places that gave them access to looking at the water. All right. And I think our seniors are a valuable part of our community. I think our disabled are. This was one of the few places that allowed the disabled to get out and take a look and be part of our beach environment and part of our beach community. And we charged the building committee with evaluating different options. But very clearly, our ask was that they come up with the best option, in their opinion, for our entire community. And there's nothing easy about that. But I think they did a stellar job, and I'm very impressed with the amount of research, the amount of presentations I had, the amount of technical tedious, and being an engineer, there's nothing exciting about engineering presentations. So I respect greatly what the committee did there. As Kristen said, it's all about risk at some point. Risk to the structure and financial risk. And the financial risk can be based on both the revenue stream, the reimbursements that are coming through, some of which are solid, some of which, by definition, are estimated. But it's also the future of our beach area. And as was pointed out, for 120 years, there's been a pavilion on this spot. The town made a decision back in the 80s to acquire this and make it a lasting town resource. We have the ability, as you saw in the financial analysis, and again, very seldom do we have a financial analysis that's this complicated and address this thoroughly as we go through. We looked at the cost of building, the cost of reimbursements, and the cost over 20 years. We very seldom get something that's that complete. And I'd like to say easy to understand, but I won't settle with complete at this point. The challenge in this is we not only have the current structure, it's not a school where it costs $10 million to build a school. We go out and we get bond that, and we get reimbursed at some percentage, and we know what that takes place. That's a fairly simple analysis from a capital project plan point. This has a lot more moving parts than that. On top of which, we have $4 million in debt. If we just magically swept the beach clean, we would still have $4 million in debt that we have to pay off for the next 20 years. So one of the options here is to create a venue that actually produces a revenue stream that not only pays for itself, but also helps pay for that $4 million in debt. And we can't change that. We have $4 million in debt. So when you're looking at how you impact the tax rate going forward, adding $4 million is not something we choose to do. Having that $4 million paid for by a revenue stream keeps that out of the tax rate. So when I looked at this, one of the things that is driving my decision is what was the lowest cost option to the town, both in the short term and in the long term. What's the lowest cost option? What costs the town the least? What helps us with the payback on our existing debt? And option 7 and I believe 1B. If I did have more time, and it sounds like my two associates are pretty committed to moving forward, and I can understand that perspective. If I did have more time, I would want to explore option 1B more thoroughly, because I think that has some impact and addresses both the financial and structure risk and helps narrow down the FEMA risk in terms of what goes there. I do want to make another point that as I've gone out and talked to folks, there have been a lot of rumors about what Penfield is and isn't, what the impact on the neighborhood. The commitment here, and I've talked to Jerry about this, so for Parks and Rec, the commitment is Penfield will be a good neighbor. There's certainly a lot of things that go on in the beach area that may not always be neighborly, but a lot of those are not attributed back to Penfield. Right? Penfield will be a good neighbor, and we'll make sure of that, and that's a commitment from the town to the neighborhood down there. So with that being said, I guess those are my comments. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Building Committee, thank you very much. All right. Item 12, next up, is a motion from the tax collector to consider and act upon tax refunds as recommended by the tax collector and the amount recommended. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Any amendments?
Yes.
All right.
Move to amend and add the amount at the end of the sentence, $12,115.70.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
The motion as amended stands before us. Any further discussion?
No.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Next up, to hear, consider, and act upon any communications. All right. To hear, consider, and act upon any other business which have properly come before this meeting. There's none that I'm aware of. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.